Shadow would get negative reception upon release, and would at the time be seen as a low point for the series, with many starting to lose faith in Sonic Team. It is at this time apparent that Sonic Team needed something good for their next big title on the upcoming 7th generation consoles. They needed something big, ambitious, and special for the 50th anniversary. Something that would be a hit, bring the Blue Bird back on top, and make a big impact. Well, it certainly made a big impact, alright. And now, more than 1 year later, we are finally talking about it. Sonic the Hedgehog, aka Sonic the Hedgehog 2006, aka Sonic 06, aka Sonic Adventure 3, aka Sonic Next Gen, aka that one Sonic game that weirdly enough appeared on an episode of Breaking Bad.
Get on with it! Yes! Get on with it!
Okay, alright, fine, I'll get on with it. I'm pretty much obligated to mention this game's notorious reputation. Not only is this game notable for killing the adventure formula, but almost kind of killing the franchise as a whole. What's ironic about this is that 06 was meant to rejuvenate the series after the mixed reception of the post-Dreamcast Sonic games that came prior. After the critically panned Shadow the Hedgehog, 06 really was a big shot, and it needed to be a big hit. And well, you probably know the story by now, but to reiterate for the sake of this review, Sonic Team wanted to make this the biggest game yet, being the main game for Sonic's 50th anniversary. However, there were major issues behind the scenes. And well, saying that is an understatement. Yuji Naka, the father of the series and the main director of this game, left during development to form his own studio, Probe. To make matters worse, Sega cut the team working on this game in half to work on Sonic Wildfire, which would become Sonic and the Secret Rings for the Wii, leaving this ambitious title with a relatively understaffed team. To add fuel to these flames of disaster, they had to finish this game and ship it in time for the game's November deadline, which led to them rushing the game out, with several pieces of content being either cut or incomplete, and many bugs and performance issues that weren't ironed out, leading to the game we all know today to come out to rather critical reviews, disappointed fans, and would pretty much change the general discourse surrounding Sonic the Hedgehog forever. Doesn't help that this game was really hyped up. I mean, why wouldn't it be? It was the big 50th anniversary title, a next-gen Sonic game, and the trailers made it look amazing! I mean, who wouldn't want to play a game this badass? What was that? Well, regardless, I have two confessions to make in regards to this game. First, prior to the month of May 2020, I had never played 06. Yeah, that's right, in the 11 years of me being a Sonic fan, I had never played the most infamous game in the series, and needing to play the game for this review kinda got me around to doing that. Second confession is that there was a part of me that was kinda looking forward to trying this game out. Mainly because it's another game in the adventure style, which is my favorite style of 3D Sonic, so that kinda had me looking forward to it. even if it may be bad. Reviewing the game, however, can present a bit of a challenge given this game's infamous notoriety and the countless reviews made of it. This is even more poignant when you take into consideration the Great Clement's 3-hour-long review, which is essentially the Sonic fandom's equivalent of the Mr. Plunkett Star Wars prequel reviews. Though this is not me saying that either of these outputs should be the definitive viewpoints that every single person must follow, despite how one experience is different to another. Nothing against Clement's review of the game, it's definitely very well made and he has a lot of great points. However, using that as a way to shut up others' viewpoints not only makes you look like a sheep, but also plays into the toxic mindset of groupthink. Not to mention, I feel that in the gaming community, there is this overwhelming sense of biased and ludicrous judgment, often passed off as logical critiques, when it comes to certain games.
How dare they put Pac-Man in 3D? How dare they try to evolve the gameplay? There's nothing like the original Maze game, and therefore it's bad.
Okay, so you're just going to completely ignore all the ways this game implements the mechanics from the Maze games into a 3D platformer just to support your biased argument? You know what, Derek? I get it. You hate anything Pac-Man related that aren't the Maze games. Can I just go home now? Did somebody say my name? What? I'm Derek Savage of Cool Cap Productions, and I'd like to talk about my new film. Oh god, oh fuck! With all that said, this is the infamous Sonic 06 after all. Surely there was a good reason why all the things said about this are said ad nauseum, right? With as much as I've played, I have a lot to say. Is any of it good, bad, or both? How about we find out as I present to you Sonic the Hedgehog. Not that one. Not that one either. Nope. Ah, there we go. Anyways, let's get moving. Or as Shadow would say, let's get moving! So, we open up in the city of Soliana, right as the Festival of Flames is going on. Princess Elise is introduced, and we lay witness to her having an acid trip. I mean, we lay witness to her having a vision of a fiery demon destroying her city, but she snaps out of it to make a short speech and let the flames commence the celebration. But then that is followed up by the festival being attacked by none other than the devious Dr. Eggman, who demands that Elise comes with him. Let me just say I love the way they introduce him, with his demented yet circus-like theme playing in the background.
A pleasure to meet you at last, Princess of Soliana. I am Dr. Eggman. I've come here to obtain the secret of the flames of disaster from you, and to take the miracle gems that are the key to its secret, the Chaos Emerald. Now, Princess, this way, please.
But then, a blue streak of wind appears as Sonic makes his appearance, making quips, taking names, kicking ass fast, and putting on a show, and doing it all in a stylish manner. You just gotta love how confident, snarky, badass, and overall in character he is in this scene.
Wow, that's a pretty snazzy performance there.
Unfortunately, this is one of the rare moments in this game where he's like this. This opening bit is great, with the way it starts off foreign, then transitions into the Sonic shenanigans we all know and love, with great animation, action, cinematography, and direction to boot. This is the modern Sonic I know. We also get a little glimpse of the new hedgehog in town, Silver, adding a sense of foreboding mystery and intrigue. In the next scene, we see Sonic running with Elise in his arms, until they are stopped by some Eggman mechs. He puts Elise down to take out the mechs, only for Eggman to snatch Elise while he's not looking. And I already see something questionable. Sonic just lets Eggman take Elise away. Why doesn't he just homing attack the Eggmobile and grab Elise? Perhaps he didn't do that because that would have put Elise at risk of getting hurt? Maybe? I don't know, this just seems contrived. Let's not focus on this too much. Also, this is the first of many times Elise gets kidnapped. Yeah, get used to that plotline. We are now dropped into the hub world. Let me just say that playing this for the first time in 2020 was quite a surreal experience. Being that I always heard about this game for half of the amount of time I've been a Sonic fan, it was like some sort of mythical Sonic game you hear about as some sort of legend, the infamous Sonic game. And there I was, experiencing it firsthand with its bizarre realism art style, weird humans, and its mostly weird controls. Anyways, the hub starts off a bit enclosed, so you won't be lost trying to get to the first level. Basic yet good design. You have a short and simple series of events to take care of before getting into the first level. You have to go over and talk to Tails, then you have to go over and talk to this old man, you do a mission for him, and then you obtain money from the mission, and he gives you custom shoes. You go over to the clerk where you buy the Lightspeed Dash, to which you use it to get to the first level, all while Tails dies trying to follow you. Rest in peace, bro. There are many instances like this in the game where you have to do a task or more before entering a level. Whether it's just one simple inoffensive thing, or multiple town missions that come off as arduous padding. Yeah, this game's pacing is all over the place. That said, I do quite like how the literal first mission of the game is just buying shoes. It's a great contrast to the crazy shit that happens at the end of the game. However, this is where one particular issue of the game rears its ugly head. It is, of course, the loading screens. You probably know all about this, so I'm going to keep it short and simple. This is an optimization issue that's a result of the game's rushed development. Not only does the loading last 20 to 40 seconds long, but you will have to sit through multiple of them. Simply put, it's annoying to have to sit through what is basically a whole lot of dead air. It breaks the pace, especially when you want to hop on for a short session. That said, this can be alleviated by doing something while you wait. You could just check your phone, rearrange something in your room, or— oh shit, the game just started! Since we are now entering the first level, Wave Ocean, it's probably a good time to talk about how it feels to control Sonic and use his abilities. And it's a mixed bag. In general, Sonic feels like a downgrade from the way he played in the adventure games. For one, his aerial movement is a bit twitchy and sensitive, which can make platforming feel a bit clunky. It's something you can get used to, but it's very awkward. The ground controls have many issues. Sonic runs at a relatively decent pace, but you're limited to that pace, with your only means of going fast being through dash pads, scripted sections, or usage of the blue gem. The latter of which being something you only have access to in the last third of Sonic's campaign, so I might as well not even mention it. Dash pads and scripted moments have been a part of the series since day one, but the ability to go fast was something the player had control over. If you can only go fast through scripted sections or dash pads, then that's a failure on the gameplay front. And even when you're going fast, he then becomes a pain in the ass to steer, with movement being way too sensitive. Either you're not fast enough or you're too fast and way too sensitive. Doesn't help that when you run into an object at top speed, Sonic falls on his ass for a few seconds. Who thought that was a good idea? Shit like that makes it even more stiff as hell. The stiffness doesn't even end there. The spin dash can only be activated while standing still, and you can't even jump out of it, making spin dash jumping impossible. Anything that was fun about the spin dash in terms of platforming and traversal is just gone. It's also useless in combat since you can barely control the damn thing, and anti-gravity is a much better alternative. In fact, combat is the only thing anti-gravity is good for. The swipe kick is fine since it's a better version of the somersault that's also good to use on enemies, but it's still rather situational. The homing attack has this delay that happens after each time it's used, so it feels stiff when used in succession. It has great range though, so I'll give it that. The balance attack is great for platforming and especially great for combat. I'm starting to see a pattern here. Yet the problem with it is that you can't move while even using it, so it's a definite downgrade from before. Rail grinding has also been nerfed. You can't switch from rail to rail like you could before. You have to manually jump from rail to rail. It's not that bad since you can homing attack rails, but it's still rather clunky. You also can't adjust your speed on them, so they are pretty much automated. That said, they do add flavor to the levels, and they are pretty well implemented into the level design. Now you may notice I use the word stiff a bit much. That pretty much is the most fitting word. The controls, abilities, and movement feel stiff and constricted, especially compared to what came out years prior. Yeah, several hours and sessions of playing Sonic 06 can really make going back to Sonic Adventure feel all the more wonderful. I seriously cannot underestimate how so good the controls in Adventure are. Movement felt natural and flowed well. Homing attacking felt good. The spin dash was fun to use, especially with all the cool stuff you could do with it. I could go on and on. Point is, Sonic Team managed to get the controls right with their first 2 3D games. There's a really good balance between speed and control, so now I may ask, is it possible that these were flashes in the pan? I ask since after Adventure 2, they've struggled to make controls that are on this level. Either they're slippery like in Heroes, or they're too stiff like in the game I'm currently reviewing. The reason I'm making a big deal out of Adventure's controls here is because, well, 06 tries to replicate that sort of playstyle, but has a hard time understanding what made the controls work. So, was 06 always supposed to control like this? I don't know. I don't think so anyway. If the beta footage from E3 is anything to go off of, that looked more fun and flowing than what we actually got. It still does seem to retain certain issues that are in the final game, but this was a beta, so they could have ironed that out. But that didn't happen. Okay, so I did say they were a mixed bag, which does mean there are good things about the controls. For one, the action button mechanic is back and better than ever. It actually carries out the intended function most of the time, so I don't find myself embarrassingly bounce attacking when I mean to lightspeed dash. Despite the moves having downgrades to some extent, in a way they still feel good and fun when pulling them off in correspondence to level design. Whether you're homing attacking, lightspeed dashing, and or jumping at the right time to dash through a rainbow hoop, there's a certain sense of inertia doing these things that help stimulate the player. However, the effectiveness of this is entirely based on the level design. So without further ado, let's start talking about each of Sonic's levels, starting with Wave Ocean. This level gives off a good idea of what most of 06's level design is like, in that it's basically a mix between the wide open and sprawling, yet still mostly linear Adventure 1 approach, and the reaction-action arcade-like approach of Adventure 2. It's a lot more wide open in a lot of places, but there are very many reflex-oriented set pieces that call upon the player's skill, and it works to create an exciting and kinetic flowing level. At least if we're talking about the first section. Getting past the quirks of the game's controls, the first section of Wave Ocean is pretty good. Also, there's this one part very reminiscent of the Orca chase in Emerald Coast. Except here, there's a little twist. People said this part is bad design because it throws an unexpected command at the player that results in a cheap death. However, that is bullshit since a similar set piece is introduced to the player earlier in the level, in a much safer place. You're taught that when Sonic clings onto the surface like this, that's your cue to hit that jump button. Come on guys, get real. Wave Ocean houses the introduction of two particular points of contention, the first being the Amigo characters. I like the idea of temporarily switching to another character in a level, as it can add a bit of a dynamic nature to the levels. On the other hand, the quality of these playable characters is so inconsistent. So we control Tails in this section, and his gameplay is a return to how he played in Adventure, and by that I mean it's a diminished return. His ground speed is way too slow. When he flies, he constantly moves forward, making his flight controls a bit more awkward. When his flight reaches its limit, rather than making a slow descent, he just plops down, which not only disrupts the flow of his gameplay, but can also be detrimental in an unfair way, like, you know, death. Which can be avoided, but it's not very fun. I also have issue with his means of attacking. Throwing the dummy ring bombs while on the ground leaves Tails stationary, making him vulnerable for enemy attack. Which would be fine if the alternative, that being overhead dummy ring bomb drops, weren't a pointless struggle where I have a hard time hitting anything. So I have problems with the way Tails plays. But I have one point of praise. While Tails was fun to play as an adventure, the level design treated him like an afterthought. Here, there is level design that utilizes his flight ability quite well. They can still be cheesed, but not to the extent that they could be in Adventure, so it's not really bad. Also, his sections do not overstay their welcome, so it's definitely paced very well too. Once you hit the switch that completes Tails' portion of the level, you then move on to the second point of contention, the Mach Speed section. These sections have Sonic kicking his speed up a notch as you steer him, avoiding obstacles and trying to make it to the goal. These may or may not have been inspired by that one set piece in Speed Highway from Sonic Adventure, only much more supercharged. These sections are often hated among those who play this game, yet I actually get a kick out of them to an extent. But I am well aware they are not good. To start, anytime you jump, your movement in the air is locked, which is bad because you need to be constantly changing directions while in these sections. This makes it so you have to really be precise with your jumps. Otherwise, you are fucked. And it's aggravating to deal with in these sections. It's a bigger problem in later Mach Speed sections than in Wave Ocean, but with Wave Ocean there are other problems. This is the most sensitive movement we'll get, which can make maneuvering around objects much too tricky than it should be, given that anything you touch hurts you. That can be frustrating. You also can't slow down in these sections, so that adds fuel to the fire. Wave Ocean's Mach Speed sections in particular has instances of crowded areas and narrow passageways, which don't exactly go well with these controls. Thing is, the level design here isn't even bad. The problem is that the level design and controls don't match up. Though I may as well mention some of the infamous death traps in this Mach Speed section. Having seemingly normal spots that you have to avoid because they're buggy as hell is not good design. That said, I can get used to the quirks of these controls, and I do have fun with most of these Mach Speed sections. With the thrill of moving at top speed and dodging all these obstacles in my way, it feels cathartic and climactic, especially with it being at the end of the level. That said, the issues cannot be ignored. Overall, Wave Ocean is a good opening level, hampered by some blemishes. And yeah, expect that to be a running theme throughout this review. So before we move on to the next level, we got a boss to take care of. Our boss number 1 is Egg Cerberus. Egg Cerberus. Cerberus.
I've never seen a talking mud before.
Okay, so either Eggman is a poser who knows jack shit about Greek mythology, or he just didn't have the budget for the other two heads. Okay, so being that Sonic 06 was pretty next-gen for the time, one of the ways they showed that off was by having gigantic bosses to take down. Seriously, the size and scale of these enemies is something quite unprecedented by Sonic standards. Okay, well, kind of. Bosses in 3D Sonic games are a mixed bag. You have ones that are great, and you have ones that are fucking shit. And with Sonic 06, many of these fights do have their problems. With the Egg Cerberus, there is a cinematic flair to this boss that helps to make it feel kinda fun. I mean the way it tries to run towards and jump on you, and how you have to dash out of the way as fast as possible, as well as the way you have to grab onto it by the horn and make it run into something to damage it, which is a unique way to take down a boss. How about this camera angle? Doesn't it look cool? doesn't this arena look cool too? All these things help to make the fight work on a cinematic standpoint, but as a boss fight, it has issues. One of which is that, for the most part, the camera doesn't focus on the boss most of the time, which is actually a consistent issue with most of the bosses. Another issue is that there was so much waiting and 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 waiting. It also would have benefited from having more means of attack to keep the player on their toes. But overall, it's a fine first boss. Just okay.
How long is this gonna go on?
So now we're at Dusty Desert, and it's the first of 2 Sonic and Elise levels. Sonic carries Elise in his arms, and the only abilities you can use are the homing attack and anti-gravity. Everything else is off limits. What these levels do give you is the power to summon this energy barrier which keeps you from sinking into the quicksand. Which is neat, I guess. But that doesn't make up for the restrictions of your other abilities. They could have made up for that if, say, the barrier also increased your speed and damage, or destroyed any enemy that came into contact with it. But alas, all it ever does is protect you from quicksand and swampy water. Sonic's gameplay is nerfed without any compensation, and because of that, I'm not the biggest fan of this gimmick. What I am a big fan of, however, is the incredible level design of Dusty Desert. One aspect of Sonic 06's level design is that levels can branch out quite a bit, much to the degree of the Genesis games. Dusty Desert is an example of this. I mean, look at all these branching paths you can take, and each of them are a joy to take with their own interesting and fun surfaces to run and platform on. It really feels like a huge sprawling environment. The enemies, hazards, and shortcuts are also really well placed. I love how this one combat section might seem like it'd be mandatory, but you can easily bypass it with a well-timed lightspeed dash. It's not that hard to pull off, but it's satisfying. Dusty Desert is a really good and replayable level. Too bad it's followed by 2 particularly horrible moments. First of which being this Sun Elise cutscene. I'll save my piece for why these scenes and this romance as a whole are horrible later on, but needless to say, the writing here is...
I'm sorry. It's all my fault.
Smile. Your smile. That's all I need.
pretty bad. It's so bad that it's almost entertaining. In the words of Scott Pilgrim creator Brian Lee O'Malley, I think the Sonic and Elise relationship is so cringe that it warps space and time and becomes something beautiful and spiritual. But you know what isn't beautiful or spiritual at all? The fucking boss fight with the new kid, Silver the Hedgehog.
I've been looking for you. You're the Iblis trigger.
This fight lives in infamy as potentially being one of the worst bosses in a 3D Sonic game, if not the worst. Simply put, the fight plays out like a game of cat and mouse, where he'll try chasing you down. You don't want to hit him while he's chasing you, since he'll grab you and slam you against the wall, damaging you. You'll have to wait until he stops and starts levitating objects, then you can hit him. Problem is, you're not clued into doing this. There's no telegraphing, so you won't know that attacking him in certain states is detrimental. Also, like most other bosses, the camera doesn't focus on him, which makes the fight a tedious juggling act of controlling the camera and trying to avoid him. Otherwise, your best way to know when to attack is to wait for the audio cue, which certainly isn't problematic for deaf people. He can also stun lock you, so that's fun. So the fight is a pain in the ass if you don't know what you're doing. But even if you do know what you're doing, it's still a shit boss. He never changes up his strategy or uses new attacks, so it becomes this easy and repetitious bore of a fight. Add on poor programming and infamous line delivery.
Take this! It's no use! Take this! It's no use! Take this! How about this? Take this!
and you have a hilarious train wreck of a fight. This would serve as a damaging introduction to what should have been the cool new Hedgehog character. Sonic kicks his ass, then Silver hits Sonic with a
"Surprise, motherfucker!"
Then Elise gets kidnapped. Again. Then Sonic continues to get the shit kicked out of him until Amy steps in and tells Silver to fuck off. Well, she doesn't say that exactly, but you get the picture. Then Sonic gets away and goes after Elise. Silver's version of this scene has one of the worst pieces of dialogue to come out of Amy's mouth, period.
In the near future, his actions will cause the devastation of my world. So I must...
No! I don't believe it. Even if that was true. If I had to choose between the world and Sonic, I would choose Sonic.
The fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, this should be self-explanatory. A better way to have handled this would have been to have Amy question Silver on his beliefs, and maybe try to reason with him, have her explain that killing random people like he doesn't know is wrong, while also making him understand the concept of innocent until proven guilty. But nah, she just gives out this stupid fucking argument instead, highlighting her Sonic obsession, and it assassinates her character for the rest of the game. It should also be noted that one of the reasons she likes Sonic is because he's a hero. If he were to one day turn evil, cause havoc, and harm innocent people, then she'd lose that admiration and maybe try and even help to take him down. Or, at the very least, try and get him back into his senses. Also, she was great in the adventure games because there was more to her character than being a Sonic-obsessed fangirl. She developed into being independent and defending herself. She was compassionate and helped those in need. She even reasoned with those who were being unreasonable. Then this game reduces her to a Sonic fangirl as her main personality, and that's just stupid! There's this one cutscene where Elise and Amy are talking about their male love interests, which already feels like something out of a bad anime. But then there's also the fact that they're obviously talking about the same person, and now it really feels like something out of a bad anime. Well, I do like how they attempted to give her and Silver a cute little friendship. Too bad that gets shot in the foot later on. I like that she saves and defends Sonic for once, so that's one step forward for her character. Too bad everything else is 2 steps back. Since we just fought Silver, I think we may as well talk about him for a little bit. If that boss fight wasn't enough to sour his reputation, then his gameplay certainly is. Silver is a character with so much potential, only for that potential to be kicked in the head. The power of psychokinesis can present fun concepts for mobility, level design, and combat, but the most it ever gets out of it is combat. I did find satisfaction in picking up enemies and slamming them into other enemies, or picking up projectiles and using them as ammunition of my own, but eventually stagnation kicks in very soon, and it becomes so fucking dull, because every enemy interaction is basically the same, since you really only have one method of attack. Doesn't help that the combat is clunky because of how awful the physics are, and this is what you're doing throughout most of his levels. Goodness gracious, at least give Silver other moves, like an energy projectile and a homing attack. He's also really damn slow too, which makes traversing the hub worlds a complete nightmare sometimes. Oh geez, I went through this long, slow run just to get to the wrong area. Looks like I have to go all the way over there. You can use his abilities to cheat a lot of the level design, which can be amusing to an extent. As far as how the level design uses his telekinetic abilities, the coolest it ever gets are these pendulums in Kingdom Valley. I found that to be neat. I like the bits where you have to knock over objects to create platforms to jump on. Aside from those, you have these parts where Silver just levitates platforms for you to do some clicky platforming on. Woo woo woo! Woo 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 woo! But then you have the fucking notorious ball puzzle. Going into this, I've heard horror stories, and it certainly lives up to them. Simply put, trying to guide the ball into its designated hole is a complete nightmare of human frustration. Your only means of moving the ball is through Silver's stupid-ass pimp slap, in which it's very easy to overshoot it. With how inconsistent the physics are and how fucking sensitive the ball is, it will always either fall into the bottomless pit or collide with the boxes and blow the hell up. Trying to beat this section legitimately was nothing but fertility. I meant futility, not fertility. My bad. Those are like two different things. As eventually I resorted to clipping through the door to get to the goal. If using a glitch is a more tolerable way of beating a level than, well, you know, actually playing the game as intended, then that's a failure on the game's front. What makes this worse is that some of the cutscenes show Silver doing cool things with his powers, making you think that he'd play like a psychokinetic badass, only for his gameplay to be a clunky mess and slow as a snail. I do think it's worth mentioning that while fighting Silver as Sonic is a poorly designed game of cat and mouse, fighting Sonic as Silver is a complete fucking joke, and a funny one at that. Holy moly, this dude doesn't have a chance. He's just getting slammed by all that Greek furniture.
Oh, shit! They jumping me! They jumping me!
Silver's campaign also has contenders for both the best and worst Amiibo characters in the game. Amy moves way too slow. Her only way to fight is with this close range attack that deals a lot of damage, but it's hard to use because its hitbox is so short. Either I'm not close enough and I end up being target practice for the bad guys, or I'm too close and I take damage. Combat with Amy is a real pain in the ass. Her double jump is garbage, and her invisibility move is so useless I forgot about it during the recording session. Amy is just not at all fun to play as in this game. Of all the characters we looked at, so far she's the worst. Blaze, on the other hand, is at the very least the best Amiibo character. I do take joy in that fact, being that I absolutely adore this character. I also find it interesting that this game shows us how she handles in the adventure playstyle, since she did have her playable debut in a boost game. She controls elegantly and smoothly, and her moves for both combat and traversal work so good. In many ways, she almost plays better than Sonic does. Almost. Though, Sonic has way more moves. Also, Blaze's homing attack is a bit weird to get used to. I think Silver's campaign would have been more enjoyable if his levels had you switching between Silver and Blaze in every level of his. Instead, we only play as her 3 different times. At least one of these 3 times, she has an entire level to herself. So, that's nice. And while we're on the subject of Silver's gameplay style, how about we talk about some trivia pertaining to how Silver's gameplay came to be? It's time for a fun fact, kids. Let's talk about 5th Phantom Saga. 5th Phantom Saga was a first-person shooter by Sonic Team that was in development around the same time as 06. It would have been centered around a silver-haired protagonist who had psychokinetic powers. Sound familiar? Though it's worth noting that these powers were portrayed by this ghost that the protagonist had control over, which automatically makes this a JoJo game, even if it has zero connection to that series. It's safe to assume that this was cancelled since it never came out. Yeah, it's not known as to why it was cancelled, but one thing that is known is that some aspects of it did live on in Sonic 06. Most notably, Silver's gameplay. It's a shame that it never came to be because it looked so cool and so interesting. But given the state of affairs with Sonic Team at the time, it's not hard to see why it never materialized. But hey, at least it lived on in a shitty alternate playstyle in one of the most infamous Sonic games. Yeah. With the exceptions of the parts where you play as Blaze, Silver's campaign from a gameplay standpoint fails. With that, as well as having debuted in this game, it's safe to say that for a time, his reputation wasn't the best. Though with the past 15 years that this game has been out, he has more or less become a fan favorite. I personally really like him a lot as a character, and I like the idea behind his character arc. I also love his character design. It really has that futuristic feel to it, which makes sense since he's from, well, the future. Living in the destroyed future, he spent his whole life fighting the very demon that destroyed his world. He is determined and hopeful, but he also struggles with having hope, and beats himself up over the situation that he has a hard time having control over. It's a good setup for his motivation, and it can be relatable if you look at it as a metaphor for how some of us struggle with certain things in our life. Granted, that probably wasn't what the writers intended, but a lot of storytelling can be reinterpreted as a metaphor of some kind. Despite his serious intentions, he still is quite a dork, and I do love that about him. though the game never overplays that aspect of him and makes him a complete dumbass, which is good, though I'm pretty sure that would have been the case if Pontac were writing this. I do really love the whole friendship between Blaze and Silver and how they show concern over each other while also working together as a team, though I do feel like this could have been taken further than it was. It still works. I love how whenever he ends up in the past, he's simply amazed by these basic environments, finding the beauty in them simply because he spent his entire life in a hellscape. To him, this is a breath of fresh air. It adds an aspect of depth to his character by presenting an attention to detail. It also adds to his motivation by showing him what he's fighting for.
This world was devastated before I was born. A harsh, bleak place where we live in eternal darkness. Life is a struggle, and people live without hope. How did this happen? No one will answer me directly. This looks so beautiful.
What? You mean this desert?
Everything is so great here, isn't it? The sky is gorgeous and everyone's happy.
Huh?
Let's go. I'll help you find who you're looking for.
So yeah, I like a lot of the aspects of Silver's story, as well as the idea behind his arc, and for the most part how it plays out. But there are aspects of it that I find to be sloppy, one of them being the fact that Blaze is here. This contradicts with her presence in Sonic Rush, as there she's from another dimension, whereas here she's from Sonic's future. This is hard to go into, especially since there's no definitive answer. This is a big problem with many things in 06's plot, such as how Iblis works or the fucking time travel. With Blaze, there are many theories, such as she was flung from her dimension into the desolate future of Sonic's dimension, or she was reborn in the Soul Dimension after sacrificing herself to destroy Iblis. I don't know, going into the logistics of these theories is enough to give me a stroke. So I'm going to plug this video. She doesn't do much in Silver's story outside of moral support and sacrificing herself at the very end, but the latter of which I'm saving for later discussion. She could have done more in the plot. Also, her and Silver's bond could have been taken further, aside from the few moments where it's put on display. At the beginning of Silver's story, they run into Mephiles. He tells them that Sonic is the cause of the apocalypse, and sends them back in time to kill Sonic. But it's so obviously a deception based on the way the game portrays Mephiles in a very evil manner, with his dark and brooding speech and eerie music. For one, it would make it hard to understand why Silver would believe anything he says, so it's reasonable for some to see Silver as a cotton-headed ninny-muggins because of this. But from Silver's perspective, he's so desperate to make things better that obviously he's gonna take any opportunity that he could potentially to do that. But for the audience's sake, this could have been presented way better. The scene where Amy confronts Silver when he's attacking Sonic is supposed to be a point of challenge in Silver's arc, where he begins to question his own actions and what's really right or wrong. But of course, Amy's argument could have been way better, especially since it's supposed to be where the purpose of Silver's objective is challenged. The scene after that has Silver contemplating whether or not it's right or wrong to kill someone for the greater good. People have scoffed at the very idea of this being subject matter in a Sonic game, but it's not like the series hasn't reached into deeper subject matter beforehand. In fact, I miss when Sonic stories had this kind of stuff. I think here it works well as a means of setting up Silver's dilemma, and how he goes about handling it with the way he tries to come up with an alternative for dealing with the situation. From this point forward, the way a story develops is solid in my opinion, but for now, we gotta get back to Sonic's campaign for a bit. So in between the Silver boss and our next stage, White Acropolis, we have a few cutscenes and a whole lot of filler to get through. Some of this filler being 2 mandatory combat missions. So now is a good time to talk about combat, specifically Sonic's combat. Take a shot every time I say combat, you'll be sure to die. As we know by now, Hero started this trend with 3D Sonic games experimenting with combat, a trend that would end with Black Knight. Though it's said that Sonic Frontiers will experiment with combat again, and I do hope that pans out well. But basically, every game in the 2010s would more or less drop combat as a specific focus.
Lies, 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 lies. Oh, you're fucking someone.
Okay, again, what the hell was that? Anyways, With Heroes in Shadow, you had gimmicks and mechanics that justified the presence of combat. 06 does this to some degree. Every character has their own unique way of fighting enemies, which does help to keep things fresh, but it's definitely overall a mixed bag. Sonic's combat can be held back by how much delay the homing attack can have. That's not exactly bad for enemies that take one hit to kill, but with big enemies with health bars, however, that can really slog down the pace. But this issue is countered because by the time big enemies show up, you unlock anti-gravity, which drains health bars with ease. Eventually you unlock the bounce attack, which shreds enemies' health bars like it's no one's business. It is satisfying to destroy enemies with the way they ragdoll and explode into pieces, and the sound design helps further that. It should be noted that enemies do fight back, so you do have to kind of be careful. There are also many arcade-like elements to the combat that make it more fun, like how some groups of robots have a leader, and if you destroy that leader, every robot in the group blows up. Or how you have rare instances of environmental mechanics that destroy enemies, which helps to make the combat feel more tangible. Another thing that I feel helps combat is the enemy design. Well, specifically the Eggman mechs. I'm mixed on the designs for the Iblis and Mephiles monsters, but the mechs have this sleek and cool designs that make trashing them all the more fun. Also, I can't be the only one that was reminded of these mechs when I saw the drones that Sonic fought in the Sonic movie. I mean, just look at them.
Okay, so post-editor's note. I just now remembered that Jeff Fowler, who directed the Sonic movie, also did work on Shadow the Hedgehog and Sonic 06, and, I believe, one of the things it helped with was, the mech designs and all that stuff. And so it kind of, makes sense as to why the drones and, the Sonic movie kind of look like the 06 robots. I just thought that was a little bit neat little thing to throw in there. Yeah. Anyways.
Okay, so to be real, aside from these things, combat is still pretty shallow and can be repetitive, and with how clunky it can feel, that doesn't help. But I still find amusement out of it. One thing I appreciate about the combat is how in Sonic's main levels, it's never really overbearing. I mean, you have those few combat rooms where you have to fight in order to progress, and that stuff is pace-breaking and unnecessary, but aside from that, combat is balanced well with the platforming. It's not like Pac-Man World 3 where it has too much dominance over the platforming to a point where it almost ruins the level design. But, would I have preferred the game not have a combat focus? Maybe. This game was structured after the adventure games, and those games never really had that much of a combat focus. Every enemy went down with one hit. But it's obvious why enemies with health bars are a thing in this game. It's justified gameplay for these two. The subject matter of combat in Sonic games is something I have mixed opinions on. At the end of the day, it's about that vision and how the game executes said vision. During this period of transition, we run into Knuckles, who was tasked by Eggman to deliver a transmission to Sonic. And here is where we talk about Knuckles' narrative presence. And by that, I mean how there's next to none. He serves zero purpose in the plot outside of delivering exposition, and him and Ruse bitching at each other. It's by this point that the writers didn't know what to do with him, and just threw him in the games out of obligation. I guess a problem with having so many damn characters in one story is that you're gonna have trouble knowing what to do with them. What's even worse here is that this is the point in which they begin to start writing him like a dumbass joke, which will unfortunately progress into several of the games afterwards. Thank goodness for Sonic Movie 2 finally making him an opposing badass with a purpose once again. Oh, Knuckles! Knuckles! Oh shit! Oh shit!
You look like I need your power.
Oh! So Sonic received the transmission from Eggman, telling him to meet him at the White Acropolis to give him the Chaos Emerald, and that he'll get the princess back in exchange.
It's most definitely a trap. I don't think Eggman will honor his agreement.
I'm going.
Sonic?
Since Eggman went to the trouble of telling me where Elise is, I think I should thank him personally.
Yeah, let's see how well that works out for you, buddy. So our next level is White Acropolis. The first section introduces Sonic's final alternative playstyle, snowboarding. This is yet another mechanic ripped straight out of the adventure games, and like a lot of things this game takes from the adventure titles, It's quite a downgrade. What was a fun and cool set piece where you jump off of ramps to pull off tricks, collect items, and gain speed is now a dumpster fire where jumping is delayed and collision is jank with how easy it is to get stuck in certain spots. I already mentioned how bad the physics are before, but these segments exemplify that just by how awkward everything feels, especially when you're jumping off of ramps, though what's funny is that most of these ramps don't even work properly. Also, just like with the Mach Speed sections, you can't control your aerial movement, which adds to the awkwardness of the controls. I also feel that the jagged and claustrophobic layout here doesn't gel well with the controls, especially with certain cheap hazard and pit placements. Now I have gotten used to the quirks of these snowboard controls, and can get past the section just fine, but it does not feel good to go through, though I do like the idea behind the set piece, with it having Sonic snowboarding his way into Eggman's base. It's a very stylish and in-character thing for Sonic to do. One thing I like about the entire level is the cold and robotic atmosphere that's pushed further with the lovely music in both acts. The second act of the stage is a thoroughly decent platforming affair. There are certain parts I do quite like, such as the curving road, which has a nice little shortcut in the form of a homing attack chain that leads to a rainbow hoop. The Tails section of the stage is pretty decently designed, but Tails is still whack as hell to play as, so yeah. I do like how the level gets very wide open to where you have multiple ways to get to the goal. Enemies are placed well in the right amount of spots to keep the player engagement high, and the item capsules are placed on the side to encourage and reward exploration. I also like that there are elevations in the ground that keep the environment from feeling too flat, and the different shortcuts you can take are pretty fun too. Aside from the shitty snowboard, this is yet another good stage. Though with this particular one, I feel that it would have been even better being able to go through it with controls that weren't slow and restrictive, but rather fast and fluid. Being able to take advantage of the spin dash by taking shortcuts and just speeding through this big environment, that would be nice, but it is what it is. It's still a decent stage though. Sonic and friends come face to face with Eggman, with Sonic handing over the emerald, but Eggman being Eggman, this is actually a trap, where he uses the emerald to power a machine that sends Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles into another point in time. Ah yes, making the characters fall for what is basically an obvious trap. A classic case of contrived plot progression. But you know what they didn't bother to contrive?
That's a Chaos Emerald.
Hey, isn't that the same blue Chaos Emerald that Sonic handed to Eggman? Why is it here? Oh, well, that's strange. Anyways. So our main trio is sent into a future drowned in damnation, to which they cross paths with Shadow and Rouge, who were also banished here. Once again, I'll talk about that later. So they need to find 2 Chaos Emeralds in order to induce Chaos Control and travel back into their point in time. This leads into the next 2 levels we'll have to go through back to back, starting with Crisis City. Boy do I love some Crisis City, one of 06's most iconic levels, and for a good reason. Thematically, it's a badass level, with it being a destroyed city with flames all over the place, fiery demons everywhere, and a flaming tornado tearing through. Though I won't deny that the Generations remake of the level is probably better, but one thing it doesn't have are some of the set pieces you have here. You start off riding a board down a road, dodging explosions and Iblis monsters, then traversing the remnants of structures and highways, being launched from building to building, platforming on the debris, being carried by strong winds, and then running away from a flaming tornado at high speeds and dodging the debris. And you go through all of this while one of the most intense music tracks in the game plays during the level. And it's kind of funny how despite the shit I gave the snowboarding section with Acropolis, I don't mind it as much here. Really, the level design here works so much better with it. It's a lot less cramped, and the hazards are placed and telegraphed well. There are rails you can hop on, as well as higher roads you can take, which adds more layers to the section. The snowboarding gameplay is still kinda messy, but Crisis City tries to make it work. And it's a good set piece. The entire mid portion of the level expands off of that fusion of SA1 and SA2 level design, with really good reaction-focused platforming and instances where the level branches out and gives you options on approaching it. The whole hellscape aesthetic leads to some really fun moments in terms of gameplay and spectacle. Speaking of which, There's a good amount of balance of spectacle and player input. It can feel a bit automated, as is usual with those 6 levels to an extent, but these moments of automation are brief, and you still have a good amount of control when choosing pathways or changing course. Also, the scripted sections in this level might be some of the most visually stunning in the game. Of course, Crisis City isn't perfect, and being that this is Sonic 06, there's a catch. This particular bit right here is not completely automated, and if you tilt the stick before Sonic lands on the rail, he might move and miss the rail, leading to a frustrating death. Some people might not know this, and it is not a good thing. This rail grinding bit is kinda awkward due to not having proper rail switching. Can't go without mentioning the Mach speed section, which is bullshit as usual. It throws so much shit at you, which wouldn't be too bad if I could control my direction while I'm in the air, but it is what it is. It's still manageable, and it's definitely not the worst Mach speed section. However, it's still annoying, but even then, I still have to admit, it looks awesome as hell with the debris flying everywhere and the fiery tornado chasing Sonic down. So far, this is the best level we've looked at. One awkward interaction with Rouge and Knuckles later, and we are now at Flame Core. There are many things in this level that annoy me. There are these fireballs at the very beginning that come at you with no warning, and they can hit at random spots. Needless to say, that's cheap and aggravating, but it's really only relevant in the beginning. There's also the few wall running segments which can be finicky sometimes. There's also a part where you have to play as Knuckles, and he sucks! In this game, his gliding is way too heavy, his melee combat feels bad to use, his ground pound is too floaty, and he's notorious for sticking onto the wall. At least his segment here is short. Also, the doors move way too slow. So, Flame Core has stuff that annoys me, but I still can't help but love it. Why exactly? Well, look at this!
Woohoo! What a view!
And this!
What? Yes! Okay! Knuckles!
The atmosphere is so badass, it's so raw. It had that same energy permeating through the adventure titles. Well, that is the case with most of this game, but especially with this level. It feels like something straight out of Adventure. The music also helps with this, but I'll talk about the soundtrack as a whole later on. There are other details I love, like how there are multiple times you get a view of the volcano, and as you get further and further into the first section, the closer you are to it until you take a dash ramp and launch yourself into the volcano, which is ridiculously cool. The outside section has this high energy action sort of feel, the kind that says, let's get this shit done. The section that takes place inside the volcano has a more calm, collected, and a bit more of a somber vibe to it, but still has that let's get it done energy. Also, the aesthetic in the second half may probably be my favorite in the game, with its occasional use of purples as well as the brightness of the lava that contrasts with the terrain's darker texture. All this combined makes for an intense yet pretty environment and helps to create that atmosphere. While there are some parts of the design that I do not like, I think the overall level layout is solid, with good use of alternate paths and some fun platforming to be had. It does have its flaws, but its good parts make it one of my favorites in the game. At the very least, a top 5 contender for me.
I found a Chaos Emerald.
Don't touch it!
What? What's this?
Chaos? Meet your younger sibling, Iblis. Iblis has 3 forms you end up fighting, with the first and third being fought by Silver, and the second being fought by Sonic and Shadow. The first fight that's at the beginning of Silver's campaign is crap. It's mostly just waiting for there to be available ammunition to throw at him, while also dodging his really slow attacks. Again, because of the size and scale of the fight, it can be exciting from a spectacle standpoint, but it can also feel like a drag with how much waiting you have to do. You're either waiting for objects to throw at him, or waiting for him to finish his slow-moving attacks. The Phase 3 Iblis fight is much more involved. The attacks here are more interesting, and you also need to defeat him fast enough before he destroys the foothold you're on, which certainly adds more urgency to the fight. I'd say I like this battle, except it's still held back by Silver's janky means of attack. But Iblis Phase 2 is easily the worst. It's a war of attrition, complete with bad camera work and constant dead air, whether you're waiting for easily to avoid attacks, or for stalactites to drop allowing you to hit the glowing rocks. You can simply damage boost your way to the glowing rocks, making the fight go by way faster, but that still exemplifies how much of a nothing boss this is. This boss would have worked much better as a platforming challenge where you need to make your way to the glowing rocks while Iblis throws projectile attacks at you. You'd have your usual fireball attacks, but he would also make stalactites fall on you and splash a wave of magma at you that would force you to take cover. When you reach one of the glowing rocks, Iblis begins to lunge at you, and you'd have to hit the rock as quickly as possible before they get to you. Iblis is stunned, you attack them, and the fight repeats 3 more times, with it getting more intense each round. And, oh, look at me, making fixes for a boss that'll never get fixed! Oh well, these are good concepts at least.
Hey, what's wrong? Is that size just for show?
That's what she said.
With Iblis out of the way, our heroes induce chaos control. Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles take the portal back to their point in time, and Shadow and Rouge are about to follow suit until they notice a particular figure. So now is a good time to talk about Shadow for a bit. But I'm solely focusing on his gameplay at the moment. While I've sprinkled bits and pieces of the stories for Sonic and Silver here and there, I feel that Shadow's story should be given its own section for analysis. It's that special. Anyways, as far as Shadow's gameplay goes, it sucks. Okay, moving forward. Alright, maybe you want me to go into more detail than that. I'd say the best way to approach Shadow when making him playable is to have him control similarly to Sonic, but also allow him to use his Chaos abilities, and not have him just be a Sonic clone, like in most other games. Conceptually speaking, 06 had the best approach for handling Shadow, but in execution, the results are not fun. Shadow's homing attack hits harder from a further distance, and can be followed up with a flurry of punches and kicks that grinds down enemies, but it looks silly and unpolished, with the way enemies don't even react until they're dead, and it feels too slow, making his fighting feel more sluggish when continuously homing attacking enemies as Sonic. Base form Chaos Spears are kinda useless. They only stun enemies, which you would think might help with crowd control, but it doesn't. It's really useless in most situations. The swipe kick, when used standing still, has greater offensive properties, but outside of the first Mephiles fight, I'm hard-pressed to find other situations where I can use it effectively. So Shadow in base form is basically just a more mid version of Sonic. That said, Chaos Boost turns things up a bit. Form 1 is a slight upgrade, but Form 2 and especially Form 3 are, well, they're better at least. Shadow hits harder, and his homing attack actually has him teleporting towards the enemies. You can even tear through crowds of smaller enemies, and the Chaos Spear actually does some damage. Chaos Boost does help the combat somewhat, but it's still sluggish, slow, and very repetitive. Sonic's combat was kinda but at least his combat options were better. And again, Shadow's levels have way more enemies, so you're gonna be doing this a lot. It gets old. His levels certainly do attempt to mix things up. Some of his platforming can be enjoyable, like in the third section of Kingdom Valley or the second section of Dusty Desert. Some levels have objective-oriented goals like destroying all the searchlights in White Acropolis or damaging Eggman's train in Radical Train. I, for the most part, hated this in Shadow's game, but here at least it works, because the level design and the objectives actually go together like bread and butter. Though the only one of these I actually had fun with was the train mission. Wave Ocean has a section entirely unique to Shadow, which would be cool if it was fun, but it's just a flat, bland area with enemy spam and a confusing objective that'll trip up a first-time player. You're supposed to hit a switch which opens up a gate you're supposed to go through. None of this is ever laid out to you. It's easy to find the switch, but you're not clued into where you need to go afterwards. But you are told that those enemies must be guarding the switch. Yeah, like I couldn't tell. Thank you for giving me such important information. The gate is on an obscure side of the map and isn't properly telegraphed, so you're going to be aimlessly dicking around. It's level design 101 that the path to the goal must be clear to the player. It doesn't help that there is a pathway on the docks that doesn't serve as an alternate path to the goal, nor does it lead you to optional goodies, but rather it leads you to a platform where you get to fight more enemies. Who thought this was a good idea? Like, honestly, who? Did a fucking monkey design this? Oh, look. A vehicle. Oh, brother. Returning from Shadow the Hedgehog, or vehicles Shadow can use. First off, there's the buggy. Its firepower packs a punch, but it can't run over enemies, which is lame, and it has the issue of toppling over a bit too easily. At least riding it down the snowboarding section of Crisis City is a bit fun, but also in Crisis City, a buggy is placed in an area that leads to a dead end, which seems like an oversight. The hovercraft is basically the same as the buggy, except it has a machine gun instead of missiles, and you're also riding over instant death water and quicksand. So if it's destroyed, your ass is drowning straight into hell. Just like with the buggy, it has physics-related problems, so this is likely to happen. Shadow's Dusty Desert serves as an example of this, with inclines that have the possibility of ruining your day, but that doesn't even come close to the bullshit in Shadow's Kingdom Valley. There are these giant stone pillars that are as fragile as Zim92's ego.
This person can go, for all intents and purposes, get hit by a bus.
If you shoot them even a little bit, they will crumble into pieces, and likely you'll be close enough for the rubble to fall on you and kill you. Actually, you don't even have to shoot them. Sometimes they just crumble on their own. And it's stupid! This is never telegraphed to you, nor is it ever apparent how far of a reach the rebel has on you, and unless you have the camera awkwardly positioned upward, you likely won't see it coming, so it comes off as cheap and frustrating. What's even worse is that this is the first time you'll use the hovercraft, and you're conditioned to want to shoot. Yet, with these pillars in the line of fire, you're basically punished for even shooting. Pure bass-ackwards design, and it's even worse with the horrible physics and control of the hovercraft. The motorcycle should be agile and smooth, but instead it's wobbly and wonky as hell. Though using the motorcycle to chase and shoot down Eggman's train in Radical Train is a pretty fun set piece. It's still jank though. Also, its placement in Aquatic Base makes no sense, both in terms of lore and level design. Then you have the hang glider. On one hand, it's fun to let loose and shoot up a bunch of enemies. On the other hand... just look at this shit! Literally, with 2 out of the 3 hang glider segments, you don't even need to perform any player input. This is pathetic! Though, at least they don't overstay their welcome. But these vehicles just suck. At least I can say that these two have at least two things in common. Those being that they both used hang gliders at some point, and they both have some sort of association with Ryoko Matoi. With Shadow's amigo characters, first you have Rouge, and she plays similarly to how she was in SA2. So in other words, she plays like Knuckles. Though instead of kicking like she did in SA2, here she throws bombs. She's always stationary when attacking, so her combat is cumbersome as hell. She also has that same issue that Knuckles has with getting stuck on walls. Just like Knuckles, she isn't very good. At most, she's well incorporated into the level design for the most part. Omega is okay. He actually controls really well and is faster than Sonic? Why? Anyways, his attacks consist of a lock-on charge shot and a regular blast, and they're both good to use. He is fun as a powerhouse character with the limited amount of times you can control him, but he lacks a lot of the destructive capabilities that he had in Heroes, so he's kind of inferior. That and he's also kind of undercooked, though I'd be completely remiss if I didn't mention his major exploit revolving around his hover move. Continuously tapping the jump button delays his descent, keeping him in the air significantly longer. This can be exploited to skip an entire chunk of Shadow's wave ocean. And yeah, I definitely took advantage of this. But yeah, that's basically everything regarding Shadow's gameplay. And yep, it's bad. Though it is carried by a good story. But looking at the gameplay specifically, I don't know if Shadow or Silver had it worse. Both campaigns suffer from critical flaws, like repetition and a general lack of polish, though Shadow has the annoyance of occasional cheap design. And with that, we have talked about every single playable character. I do like how this game tries to be the logical evolution of what 3D Sonic was up to that point, basically being the closest thing we have to Sonic Adventure 3. Though the whole Crash 4 situation leads me to say that this doesn't cancel out the possibility of a real Sonic Adventure 3, or a Sonic Adventure 4 if you will. But putting all that aside, by doing this, Sonic 06 lends itself to its own doom. Its Achilles heel is the amount of characters it tries to shove into one game. So much time is put into creating so many playstyles that there isn't enough time to make them fun or polished. Only 3 out of the 9 characters are decent, and even those ones have issues. Now with a complete dev team and a more reasonable deadline, then maybe this could have been pulled off. But because of the dev team being cut in half, the main director leaving, and the rushed development, this had a snowball's chance in hell of working. I think that they only really should have focused on the main 3, Sonic, Shadow, and Silver. More time should have been put into making their playstyles fun and exciting. Sonic should be exhilarating, Shadow should be powerful, and Silver should be liberating. Instead, all 3 of them fall short of their potential, though Sonic is, at the very least, decent. The other 2, however, are just either broken, boring, or both. And then the Amigo characters, with the exception of Blaze and maybe Omega, are just bad. With its playable characters, Sonic 06 is a jack of all trades, but a master of none. It's the Icarus that flew too close to the sun. That said, we still have a lot left to talk about with gameplay. We still have the remaining levels, bosses, and other stuff to cover. The Mephiles fights are based around power dynamics, with him initially having the higher ground, and you needing to build up Shadow's Chaos Gauge to do any damage. When you're in Chaos Boost mode, you have the upper hand. An interesting concept, and it does remind me of how the ghosts in Pac-Man function, though only on the instance of it being based around power play. Yet it could have been taken further than it was. In the phase of the fight where you're building up your Chaos energy, Mephiles could have thrown more interesting attacks your way, while also having him summon different minions with unique abilities to make the fight more overwhelming. So when you do build up enough energy, the pendulum shift feels more apparent and rewarding. Yet, as the fight is, all he does in the initial phase is just having these easy to counter minions attempt to dogpile you. Yeah, that's really it. It's sort of underwhelming. but the second phase where you fight him as Omega is decent. The second Mephiles fight had the opportunity to build off of this, and to some extent it does by having minions that are larger and taking more time to defeat, but this really isn't enough. It's still shallow. Though with the part of the fight where you are in Chaos Boost form, Mephiles actually does have more aggressive attacks, and it actually feels like a full-on fight between the two. It stands as one of the better boss battles in 06, and again, the story gives it more of an impact, but more on that later. For now, let's return to the present with Sonic.
Looks like we made it back in one piece.
We now need to get the bounce attack and use it to get to the next level. One thing I like about Sonic's campaign is that anytime you get a new ability, the next level you go to has good usage of that ability. You get the Lightspeed Dash before Wave Ocean, and Wave Ocean has paths that use the Lightspeed Dash. Dusty Desert introduces big enemies that you can use the anti-gravity on, and the bounce attack comes in handy in Radical Terrain when it comes to dealing with the conveyor belts and getting through the combat faster. It gives that nice feeling that the level design is evolving alongside the character you're controlling. Granted, there are games that do this better, but I digest and agree to digress. So, Radical Terrain. This level is easily in my top 5 for the game. The whole concept where you have to protect this train from getting destroyed is really well implemented and manages to flow well with the pace. I love the theme the level goes for, and it does a good job applying to that theme with the level design. The platforming revolving around wooded surfaces and conveyor belts were fun, though I feel they could have been taken further, but they're still nice and they do complement the level's identity. Same thing with the grimy railroad aesthetic, which I very much like. Rail grinding is also well implemented. The shortcuts are fun and it's a nicely flowing level, though the Mog Speed section has jumps that are hard to calculate, thanks in no part to the lack of aerial control. Basically an issue with every Mog Speed section. At least when you get past that, the part where you're chasing the train is fun and exhilarating. A really good level, aside from some blemishes. More platformers should have levels that take place in rail transports. Oh hi Spark the Electric Jester 2! Sonic saves Elise, but then Sonic's attacked by Silver, and then Eggman captures Elise. Again.
It feels like we're going around in circles.
As Silver's about to kill Sonic, Shadow jumps in to save Sonic and confronts Silver. It should be noted that this is the only scene before the final story where all three Hedgehogs are together, so that's neat. This is a nice scene only because we get to see Shadow being cool as hell. We'll save the confrontation between Shadow and Silver for later. For now, we'll continue following Sonic. With Elise being sick of being such a poorly written character, she attempts to end her suffering, but Sonic saves her in time, and Eggman goes, "You know what? Fuck you! Here's an orange box!" Fun fact, the Egg Genesis is called the Egg Mega Drive in the European release. Okay, so jokes aside, the Egg Genesis, like a lot of other bosses in this game, is yet another fight with a nice sense of size and scale, but is overall undercooked. It's one of those fights where the boss will do an attack, then leave themselves open for you to attack them. The attacks, however, aren't challenging or interesting enough to justify the structure. Also, there are 2 ways to damage the Egg Genesis, and one of them barely even works, so why bother? I think this fight would have been much better if it was like the Mega Leg fight in Super Mario Galaxy. You know, a Shadow of the Colossus-styled boss, where you try to stay on top of it, and destroy all its weak points while it tries to knock you off. Well, Meta's Hell boss aside, we are then treated to this cutscene.
I owe you a lot, Sonic.
Tropical Jungle is up next. It's the second and last Sonic and Elise level, and just like Dusty Desert, I find it to be delightful in spite of the gimmick. The first half might be a bit too much on the automated side of things, but the reaction-based design here is still solid, with my favorite part being the short rail grinding gauntlet, where the stage mixes up jumping from vines and homing attack chains to reach rail, to which it then climaxes into this cute little moment between Sonic and Elise, where they think they're about to hit the water, but are then strung up into the air. It's an exciting set piece and one of the few good moments between Sonic and Elise. Even if there is too much automation, the scripted bits are still staggering. I also love the level's theme, even if it has been done before in the series. I don't know, I guess I'm a sucker for levels that take place on treetops. The second half is where the level is at its best, with so many branching pathways, with the top paths being really fun to take, though this level might be frustrating if you don't know what you're doing, and because of this, some parts might come off as cheap, so it may deduct points for that, but if you do know what you're doing, it's quite enjoyable, with the many different ways to get to the goal. It even has the best usage of Elise's shield mechanic. In fact, the whole stage puts the Elise carrying gimmick to good use, with the set piece mentioned earlier, and level design in the second act. Pretty good level it is overall. That is if we're talking about Sonic's version of the level. The version of the stage in the other two campaigns is completely different, as that one is a maze. It is a frustrating nightmare to traverse as Silver, and a complete joke as Rouge, since you can basically glide over almost everything. There's no balance, but one thing is for sure, I dig the overall aesthetics of Tropical Jungle, and you know how I said Flamecore might have my favorite aesthetic? Yeah, this one might actually rival it. In the cutscene following the level, we see Sonic bringing Elise to a grassy field, while pretty music plays, with not-so-subtle romantic undertones. Now it really feels like we're going around in circles. Well, I don't have much to say about this scene, other than it's more cheesy forced romance that's bad. In the next scene, we see Eggman threatening to eviscerate Soliana unless Elise surrenders herself. Elise decides that for the good of her own people, she goes aboard the egg carrier, thus the final time she gets captured, making it a whopping 5 times she gets captured. How can one character be so useless? And yes, just like the previous 2 acts, this third and final act of Sonic's story is all about saving Elise. Sonic's campaign has the worst narrative of all 3 of the main hedgehogs. One of the reasons as to why is repetition, but I'll elaborate more later.
Did your parents ever disclose to you anything about Solaris? Solaris's secrets are in his eternal flames. His power can change time.
Wow! Eggman giving exposition on Solaris? For the second time? Yeah, we really are going around in circles. And now we are controlling Tails? Okay then. We control Tails as we need to find Sonic, and we do that by going through Wave Ocean? Again? Okay, this is obviously padding, and it's not even justified well enough. It's not like you beat the level and it's followed up with a cutscene where Tails runs up to Sonic chilling in Wave Ocean and telling him what's going on. Nope, you just beat the level and you're instantly plopped back into the hub world as Sonic. There's no story justification for this. Now, if this was a brand new level, it wouldn't be so bad. But it's literally the same level we've already been to in this campaign. This really could have been removed, and nothing of any purpose would be lost. All this does is reinforce how awkward it is to play as Tails. Man, 1 minute I'm saying nice things about this game, and then the next minute I'm cursing its name! Oh, and also, this happened. Good stuff, you know. Good game. Before we get into the game's best level, we have a final batch of side stuff to talk about. One of those things are the hub worlds. Going back to Sonic Adventure, that game had pretty damn great hub worlds. There were many charming locations, memorable landmarks, interesting NPCs, and they were easy to go around. Seriously, they really did a decent job of pointing you in the right direction, even if they went kind of overboard in some ways. With the fun controls, they were fun to traverse, but you know what my favorite part of the hub worlds were? Well, you might think this is silly, but it was the entrances to the levels. They contextualized them and had them make sense. They were interconnected so well that the actual levels felt like extensions of the hub world, and that's very neat to me. No other Sonic game with hub worlds had ever done that. 06 in particular instead had you touch a stone portal to get to the level. And that's not as cool, but it's fine, you know. At least the stone portals fit with the fantasy aesthetic of Soliana. It does make the levels in hub world feel more disconnected, however, but they do have the environment surrounding the portal fit in with the level's theming, so there's that. But the main problem with the hub worlds is that they're not very good, let alone fun. Okay, so admittedly I found the Soliana town to be charming, but none of these hub worlds compared to the likes of Sonic Adventure 1's hub worlds. There was no distinct design. It's either only the same building copy pasted, or a flat open field of nothing. But the worst problem with the hub worlds is that sometimes the game does a poor job of guiding you in the right direction. So on your first playthrough, you could easily find yourself meandering around trying to locate your next objective, though I will admit I found amusement in the NPCs. Sonic Team knew how weird it was to have Sonic interacting with hyper-realistic humans, so they played into that by having the humans say the most absurd shit. I'd be hard-pressed not to mention Sonic Man. A guy who's such a big Sonic fan that he acts like him so much to a point to where he's convinced that he is the real Sonic. You gotta love the guy. Let's talk about the town missions. Little challenges you can do to earn currency, and for 100% completion if you hate yourself enough. A lot of these have you either fighting a group of enemies, collecting rings, jumping through rings, racing someone, reuniting a dog with their owner, fighting more. Alright, okay, you know, I'm pretty sure you get the whole gist of it. Yeah, these are bland. The crippling issue with them are those damn loading screens you're gonna have to deal with. Outside of the town missions, getting a rank above E in the main levels earns you some currency, with the highest rank S netting you 1,000 rings. Oh yeah, the ranking system. I haven't talked about that. Even though it's a significant element in level-based 3D Sonic games that ties every core gameplay element together, I was gonna talk about it in the SA2 review, but I scrapped that segment because the video was running a bit too long. Quite ironic considering the current circumstances. But yes, getting a rank better than your previous run of the level was a sign of improvement, and getting an S rank, or an A rank with the game's preceding Sonic Rush, showed that you mastered the level. It's a nice mechanic to add, and especially since it implores players to do more in a level than speed past everything, as the rings you collect and the amount of enemies you defeat play into the overall score along with the time in which you take to beat the level. It's even better when the game has incentives, like in the adventure games where getting the highest ranks rewarded you with emblems that unlock alternate skins, the Game Gear titles, and or a bonus level. Or in the case of 06, you're rewarded with currency. In this instance, even an A or B rank is sustainable, as you still get a decent amount of money. But yeah, with the town missions, I only ever bothered with the ones for Sonic's campaign. With Shadow and Silver, all their necessary abilities are easily obtainable with money you get from the main levels. There aren't any cool, optional upgrades you'd want to get for them, so your only incentivization to do their town missions is 100% completion. And that's a merry-go-round in hell that I don't want to take. Sonic, on the other hand, has the optional and oh-so-fun gems. These different colored gemstones that give Sonic additional abilities, such as dashing, slowing down time, performing a breakdance tornado that hits nearby enemies, shrinking for some reason, and having an infinite amount of jumps, throwing a stone that flings you to any area it lands, an alternate homing attack that kills enemies in one hit, and an electric shield. There was also going to be a rainbow gem that would have allowed the player to turn into Super Sonic during the main levels, but that got scrapped, though it can be put back into the game through hacks. However, the animation is the only thing you'll get out of it. This is fun. It expands Sonic's moveset without having to come up with different button combinations, and the abilities could present different ways to go about the levels. In theory, that is. But I have to mention how broken they are. And I don't mean broken as in balancing. I mean broken as in the developers literally forgot to program the fucking energy meter. That's right. You have unlimited usage of them. You have dash like a maniac, soar like an eagle, fling yourself to your heart's content, the full unadulterated power of the gyms are in your hands for vast use. Go forth and go get him, you gemstone crusader! But yeah, there's also a lack of polish with some of the gym abilities. In general, the purple, light blue, red, and, to some extent, blue gems are the most useful, though the blue gem is the most tricky given the whole bumping into walls issue. The green gem's tornado kick is nice for combat variety, but it's too slow and sluggish for my liking. The white gem's homing attack taking out enemies in one hit is pretty cool, and it's neat how it uses unused homing attack recoil animations, but apparently it doesn't even work. So much for that, I suppose. And the yellow gem, well, it's good for getting rings, like
Give me a big, fat break!
But yeah, the gyms are fun and do give me a good reason to do the town missions. And our final bit of side content are the Soliana medals. They're littered throughout the hub world, and there are also 8 of them in each of the main levels. There are bonus medals to get through beating the main levels and bosses, as well as other bonus medals you'd get from S ranks. So medals are like this game's equivalent of the emblems of yesteryear. They're fun to nab, but what do they do? Do they unlock skins? Nope. How about older 8-bit and 16-bit game? Nope. Do they unlock a secret? Nope. Do they even? Nope. Okay, so what do they do?
Nothing! Absolutely nothing!
Yep. You gotta be
stupid
to think they're worth a damn. Oh, these Soliana medals in there. They're nothingness. They don't do anything. The Soliana medals, they don't do anything. That's funny. All that trouble you have to go through to get them all, and they do nothing. All those collectibles that just do nothing. They do nothing. They do literally nothing. They do nothing. The road to Kingdom Valley will test your patience, as before you have access to the level, you have to do 3 different town missions. The first one is a guessing game, where there are many sets of 3 portals, and you have to jump in the right ones. Taking the wrong portal sends you back to the beginning. It's annoying. The second one is a combat challenge, where you have no rings. It's annoying. The third and final one is a simple choice between whether or not your true love is Elise or Amy, and thankfully this one is short and painless, but the implications aren't any less awkward. But obviously the worst part about this entourage of filler are those damn loading screens. In this case, you'll have to go through 13 of them. Hell, you may have to go through more if you fail one of them. The 3 trials in Sonic's campaign are certainly a negative talking point for many, but what if I told you? Silver has the same thing, but even worse. Not only does he also have to do 3 trials, 2 of them being repetitive combat and 1 annoying guessing game, but he also has to do a fucking escort mission. You know, everyone's favorite type of mission. Have fun going at a snail's pace, protecting some slow as hell woman, while dealing with some of the most obtuse combat mechanics seen on this side of Dumbass Land. You know, Silver, wouldn't it have been simpler to just carry her to the goal with your psychokinesis? But no, it gets even better. Autosaving was a thing since Sonic 3 on the Genesis, and was carried into every Sonic game that came after. Except for this one. How they were able to fuck up saving is a mystery to me. Granted, the game does give you the option to save after any main level or boss fight is completed. For town missions though, it doesn't automatically give you the option, so you have to manually save. Unfortunately, going into Silver's Kingdom Valley during my first playthrough of this story, I didn't bother to save before going in, and I ended up biting the dust, getting a game over. And guess what? Because I didn't save, I had to redo up to 30 minutes of filler! I had to redo the fucking escort mission. I had to retake those 3 stupid-ass trials. I had to sit through all those fucking loading screens again. It was easily one of the most painful and agonizing experiences I had with this game. Granted, this is something you can easily avoid by saving before going into level, but the fact that this even happened at all is still ridiculous. And the fact of the matter is, the player having to sit through 20 to 30 minutes of unfun, purposeless filler is already a bad thing as is. Alright, anyways. Kingdom Valley. For Shadow, it has its highlights, but also some bad design that bogs it down. For Silver, it's one of his better levels, with its greater emphasis on platforming, but he's still chronically unfun to play as, and so it's still a drag. But in terms of Sonic's gameplay, well, it's probably the best level in the game. It's easy to tell because of how much work must have been put into it, given its prominence in all those showcases and old beta screenshots. The first section is incredibly wide open, with many differing pathways, and they're fun to take, especially with the higher paths having the right amount of difficulty to feel like an exhilarating challenge. Later sections are more linear, but make good use of the mechanics like lightspeed dashes, the wind rails, those bungee ropes you balance off of, not to mention those fun little moments where you break through the stained windows or run down the crumbling staircase, as well as those moments where the mechs chase you while you're grinding on the wind rail. Not to mention this bit at the beginning where you homing attack this enemy into the bridge, causing it to collapse so you can use it as a platform. There's just a lot of good environmental interaction. There's just a lot of fun spectacle in this level. Seeing Sonic dash through an abandoned Gothic castle is just appealing to me. But man, that Mog Speed section at the end is incredible! Yeah, I have already made note of the problems with the Mog Speed sections, but in this instance, I just don't care. This one is just really fun, and really cool to look at, especially with this crossing of the Red Sea aesthetic. Those parts where Sonic is just running on the waterfall is just so awe-inspiring. Though if there was one thing I didn't like about this level, it's definitely the bits where you have to play as Silver. Even then, it's still not that bad, and goes by quickly. And yes, there's at least 1 or 2 moments where you'll switch to the main character of another campaign for a short section. And it's weird, but it's played into the narrative well enough, so I'm fine with it. But yeah, Kingdom Valley is just a really good level. Unfortunately, it's rendered useless in the story. The A-carrier begins to malfunction, leading to it eventually crashing, killing both Eggman and Elise. Sonic, Silver, and Blaze catch up to the A-carrier, only to witness this happen, and so hope seems lost. Until they remember that they have access to broken time travel abilities that have no limit, can be used at any time, and completely eliminates any sorts of stakes or tensions by giving the characters a literal undo button. And it also creates other questions, like why aren't the heroes taking advantage of this mechanic to have the upper hand over the villain, and all these problems are just reminders that they shot this screenplay out the door without giving it the second draft that it desperately needed! Sonic goes back into the point before Eggman and Elise boarded onto the A-carrier. Would have been smarter to go back even further before he kidnapped her again, and simply just kick his ass for good, but let's not try and put logic into a narrative that doesn't care to have any. So you hit 3 bells, and the next and final level is unlocked. Also, have I mentioned that the camera in this game is ass? As we desperately race against time to reach the A-carrier before it lifts off, we are at Sonic's final level, Aquatic Base. I used to write this off as a bland, repetitive mess of enemy spam, but as I continue to write this, I do see it's more than that. It takes a lot of what you've experienced beforehand and pretty much throws it all in one final gauntlet of endurance. You get instances of reflex-based design, you have more difficult enemy arrangements, they spice things up with the previously mentioned environmental mechanics, Tails and Knuckles get their time in the spotlight, there's this cool detail at the end where the alarm starts to go off, probably signifying the A-carrier getting ready to lift off. The environment being this abandoned underwater research facility is damn cool. But oh man, the dramatic and tragic yet hopeful, determined atmosphere that's accentuated by the profound music. Even in the lesser Silver and Shadow versions of the level, the atmosphere is still strong. The level has so much going for it. yet it's also the most combat-focused level. With that in mind, it's especially here where the sluggish and uncomfortable feeling of the combat truly gets its showcase. It just feels slower than it should, and I wish there could have been more of an emphasis on challenging obstacle courses and hazard placement. But I still see what they were going for with it. It's still a climactic stage. I do feel it's worth mentioning that Freedom Planet has a very similar level to Aquatic Base with its thermal base, though Freedom Planet did it significantly better, but that's neither here nor there. Well, we basically covered almost every level the game has to offer. Well, at least mostly from Sonic's perspective. It's safe to say that every level has at least one thing bad about it. Whether it's a bad Mach Speed section, an abysmal snowboarding segment, or just generally unpolished jank. Yet, in spite of the gameplay problems, the game is still carried by consistently solid and intelligent level design. They give the player so much to toy around with, so many different paths, and many different things to interact with. It takes design approaches from previous 3D Sonic games and translates them well here. And with the leap in hardware, you have levels that are more wide open with greater sense of discovery. Okay, so don't get me wrong, it's not perfect by any means. You still have to deal with the lifeless and restrained physics. There's a lack of polish in certain areas. Still though, it cannot be denied how much passion was put into these levels. Just like with the Genesis games, just like with the adventure games, and just like with Heroes, there's this desire to wow the player, which is something I cannot say the same for with Forces or Sonic 4 Episode 1. Now, does it ever come close to the highs of Adventure, Adventure 2, and Heroes? In some instances, I'd say somewhat, but for the most part, I'd be inclined to say no. But regardless, the levels of Sonic 06 deserve more appreciation than they end up getting. Oh, but I also have to ask, does having this consistently enjoyable level design make up for the game's other issues? Well, there are other things I still need to talk about before answering that question. We are now at the very edge of Sonic's campaign, with a final duel against Eggman as he pilots the Egg Wyvern. And yes, this is yet another instance of Sonic 06 taking inspiration from Sonic Adventure. Case in point, this fight plays out like the Egg Viper battle from that game. All it's missing are those repetitive quotes. And well, on that note...
Get a load of this! Get a load of this!
Yeah, now it's perfect. But yeah, this fight certainly doesn't hold a candle to the Egg Viper, but there still is merit to it, though it does start off with the issue of having long wind-up attacks that are easy to dodge, but as the fight progresses, he continuously breaks down more and more of the platform you're on, reducing the space you have, thus making his offenses pose a viable threat. It actually feels kind of intense. It still needs a lot of polishing though, but it stands as one of the better fights in the game. Also, his defeat animation looks stupid as hell, and I love it. With Eggman defeated, we are treated to one final cutscene where Sonic and Elise share what might be their best moment together. It's admittedly a nice scene.
Aren't you worried? If you have time to worry, then none, right?
Yeah! You remember how that girl in there, the people that was racing, they were, yeah, she was the glitch.
Yeah.
You telling me they don't look at me like the motherfucking glitch?
Sonic 06 is glitchy.
Whoa, really, dude? That's fucking crazy. Holy fuck. Really? Holy shit. What the fuck? What the fuck? Holy shit.
I know. Shocking, isn't it? Yeah, that probably doesn't come as a surprise to most of you. The game's buggy nature is probably one of the most commonly known aspects of it. And depending on who you are, it's either a point of contention or a source of ironic enjoyment. Thing is the game really that glitchy? Yes, kinda, but maybe it isn't that glitchy? There are parts that are definitely bugged, and the game in many regards is blatantly unfinished. But as far as how much the game straight up bugs out, well, it's inconsistent from playthrough to playthrough. Some playthroughs are more glitchy than others, though the fact that the game can and has the chance to inexplicably kill you with some wacky nature is unacceptable. The game's general lack of polish is unacceptable as a whole, even if it can be funny. As far as I can recall, there was one glitch on my first playthrough where in Crisis City, I was bouncing from spring to spring only to miss one and fall to my death. One of my personal favorite glitches is one where a companion character would just die for no reason, and their corpse would just stay there.
She's just dead. Oh god, Amy. No. Oh. She just died there.
Some creepypasta shit, let me tell ya. Does get a chuckle out of me though. And then there's this one. If you can go through a loop without touching the dash pad, you'll see your character casually strolling through the loop defying the laws of gravity. There are also several exploits I've managed to pull off. While this particular thing isn't necessarily a glitch, it still falls under the classification of an error, in that they accidentally keep in recording mistakes.
Agent Shadow, E123 Omega has engaged Mephiles. Head to the Wave Ocean, head to Wave Ocean immediately. Agent Shadow, E123 Omega has engaged Mephiles. Head to Wave Ocean immediately.
Boy, I sure hope somebody got fired for that blunder. There have been countless glitches posted online, many of which involve Sonic getting flung into space. Point is, the game is broken. Glitch hunting can be fun, I will say, though I do feel that there is some over-exaggeration regarding the glitches. They definitely aren't the game's biggest issue. They're just one of many.
Are you recording?
Yeah, I'm recording it.
Oh my god. Okay, so it's 3 tokens required.
It's the Sanrio one, right?
Yes! They're cats! They're fucking cats.
And on that note, what about the story? I've covered bits and pieces of it here and there throughout the review so far, but I guess it's time I give it the general inspection. It has the notoriety of being one of the most infamous stories in the series. I, however, find that this is not the worst the series has when it comes to story. The previous game, Shadow the Hedgehog, was a disaster of incomprehensible storytelling. It tries so hard to be dark, but chickens out in so many areas. But they force out mild swearing to make you think it's mature. Can't forget this lovely line of dialogue. Point is, compared to Shadow, 06 is a masterclass of story. It's also leagues better than the meta-era stories. And yeah, I'll get to those when I get to those. Okay, 06 having a better narrative than Shadow or the meta-era games isn't exactly high praise. 06's story is still a mess of many layers. But on a conceptual standpoint, it's not terrible. It's actually a promising idea. A big ensemble adventure in a unique locale with cool world building, a cool new hedgehog character, a dark, sinister new villain, a destroyed future, larger-than-life stakes, and time travel. There's so much going on. It's a promising idea, but it also needed a lot of work. And of course, it didn't get that. The time travel is ridiculous, since it has no defining mechanics. There's no limitations or consequences. It's just something that the characters can do at will, provided that they have 2 Chaos Emeralds. Sonic and friends have such a big advantage over Eggman with this ability that it makes no sense why they didn't take certain actions. Then there's Mephiles, who can time travel at will, giving him an advantage over everyone else, which makes you wonder why he doesn't take certain actions as well. When it comes to the game's stakes, most of them are non-existent due in part to characters being able to go back in time and fix crap without consequences. Boy, I sure wish I could do that! Don't get me started on all the plot holes this creates, and especially don't get me started on the game's place in the timeline. Iblis being inside Elise isn't too stupid of a concept, but what is stupid is that her crying is what would release Iblis. Keep in mind, this is a character who suffered the trauma of losing both her parents as a young child, as well as having to follow in their footsteps as the leader of a country. Now you'd have to be a fucking sociopath to not cry at your own parents' death, especially if you're a kid. But hey, maybe it was installed into her as a young child to be strong and never give in to weakness. And that her meeting Sonic changed her, giving her a friend and allowing her to actually feel. But none of this is ever conveyed well at all. The most they do is force out a bad romance between her and Sonic. As a character, Elise is about as bland as your average side character in SAO, and she spends most of her time getting kidnapped, so her presence serves as more of an annoyance. And no, I do not think she needs to be a shonen-level powerhouse that can do 2 million backflips and wipe out an army of men with the swipe of a finger in order to be a good character, but for fuck's sake, you could do a lot better with her in terms of building her character and her relationship with Sonic. So now, how did this game handle Sonic as a character? Not very great, honestly. He has a few scenes where he's in character, and a few nice lines of dialogue, but in terms of his personality, they made him more...
Don't be late.
How do I put it? Serious? Yeah, serious. In the previous games, he was fun-loving, cocky, and charismatic, but when the story needed him to be serious, he didn't screw around. Not to mention, he had moments of sincerity and depth. Like how he came up with an alternative for dealing with chaos because he knew sealing him away again wouldn't have done shit. Or how he felt remorse for losing Shadow at the end of SA2, despite how much trouble he gave him. I haven't played Riders, but from what I've seen of its story, it has the right idea regarding his character. Same for Sonic X, in spite of how poorly aged that show is. He has a lighthearted aspect to him, but also a coolness factor, and a bit of an edge to make him stand out. A lot of that is not present here. They toned him down to make him more serious, in which now Elise is his only focus. Like, he doesn't once think about that silver hedgehog that's trying to murder him, even when he's in the same room as him, unlike in SA2, where he was focused on getting back at Shadow. So yeah, he's so bland, he makes Kirito look like Dante in comparison. Tails is here out of obligation, and the most he adds to the story is something that amounts to an afterthought, and Knuckles is just here, being about as useful as a backstage pass to Limp Bizkit. Eggman is... alright, I guess? He has good lines, and Mike Pollock's delivery for them is solid. He has cool moments, and manages to trick the heroes a few times. Granted, this is entirely on the basis of this game's versions of Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles being as competent as Mr. Methrat's handling of Twitter. So Eggman is alright, but the story doesn't really give him much to do outside of kidnapping Elise, delivering exposition, delivering more exposition, and being a basic obstacle for Sonic. Sonic's story is the worst of the three, because it's nothing more than a repetitive game of hacky sack that Sonic and Eggman play with the princess. Meanwhile, Shadow and Silver experience a big adventure with themes of redemption, self-discovery, friendship, fighting for what you believe in, and so on and so forth. And they also deal with the main antagonist of the game, something that Sonic doesn't get to do. By comparison, Shadow's campaign feels like the main story, and Sonic is just a filler episode. And need I remind you what this game's name is? And then there's the Sonic and Elise relationship. It should be known that the concept of Sonic having a human girlfriend dates all the way back to the beta days of Sonic 1, with the scrapped Madonna character. It was an idea that was dropped, as certain people at Sega were quite against it. With how the similar idea was received in 06, it's not hard to see why this was initially rejected. Though what gets me is that when Roger Rabbit did the same thing, nobody batted an eye. Yet when Sonic does it, suddenly it's weird. But yeah. The common takeaway people have from this is, ew! Sonic is in a relationship with a human woman! While I have previously joked about this, I honestly couldn't care about that. And given that both humans and anthros exist on the same planet in the series, who's to say that there aren't any human and anthro relationships? Okay, I probably should stop while I'm at it. Look, I'm not saying that this was a good idea, and for the time, it definitely wasn't. But the concept wasn't the worst part of it. It's not even remotely portrayed as sexual. Well, at least the parts we see anyway. Who knows? Maybe when we're not looking, they could be fucking the pain away so much that their bed's in ruin. No, the worst part of the romance is that it's a bad romance. A good romance can be compelling, and while I hate to admit it, they do have some scenes that are nice, but those are few and far between. It's mostly surface level schlock, where they hardly have any chemistry, and there really isn't any conflict to make it interesting. It's so forced, and it's on the level of a self-insert fanfiction. And I'm definitely not the first person to say something along those lines. Changing Elise to a hedgehog might make it appear less weird, but it does jack shit to actually fix any of the core issues with this plotline. I guess this is all I have to say regarding Sonic's mediocre story in his own self-titled video game. Now, as far as the rest of the story is concerned, I do have my fair share of positives to go over. As I mentioned before, I love the idea behind Silver's arc and how personal it feels, with the motivation from his actions being stemmed from the trauma of living in a hellish future. He gets to see what he's fighting for, which furthers his resolution, but he's trapped in the moral dilemma of whether his actions are right or wrong. It's a very personal and human story, but unfortunately there are some particular hiccups in its execution, and it doesn't quite reach enough of its potential. But when it gets right, it gets really right. And when he and Shadow go back 10 years into the past to discover the truth, that's where everything starts to come together. As we see him question his objectives and the motives of Mephiles, seeing him finding out the truth is rewarding. Not to mention, he also discovers a way to deal with Iblis in the future. It's by this point that he realizes he was completely wrong for trying to kill Sonic. So how does he redeem his actions? Well, by helping Sonic, of course.
You look like you're in a hurry. So, what's going on?
Circumstances have changed.
He never even directly says sorry to him, but you can tell by his body language that he's regretful for his actions. After helping Sonic, Silver and Blaze return to their future, with proper knowledge on how to deal with Iblis. They have one final battle with the Flame Demon, and Silver tries to seal Iblis inside of him, only for it to be to no avail, so Blaze steps in to seal Iblis, while commanding Silver to use Chaos Control to send them away to another dimension. But having grown attached to Blaze, Silver doesn't have it in him to follow through.
Didn't we already go through this? We agreed to save the world at any price!
I can't! I wouldn't know what to do without you! You fought alongside me to save the world! You're my friend, right?
And in a rather touching moment between the two,
Blaze says this to him.
You're still so naive. But I've always liked that about you.
And so, she sacrifices herself, putting an end to Iblis. Silver succeeded at bringing in the prospect of a brighter future, but it came at a severe cost. Losing Blaze. Someone who had been by his side for so long. In a way, there is a message here, that in spite of the circumstances, you should cherish what you have in your life. Because, well, nothing lasts forever. Silver's story is quite memorable in spite of some sloppy execution, and it helps that Silver as a whole is a likable character. It's not hard to see why he's a fan favorite. And now, we've saved the best for last.
Transmission from HQ. There's an SOS coming from Dr. Eggman's base. Our last communication with our agent was 26 hours ago. We expect an immediate rescue. Shadow the Hedgehog.
Understood. Initiating the mission now.
Shadow's arc in 06 is legitimately really good. For one, his growth as a character is quite immediate. He's moved on from the past, and has even gone as far as to work alongside Gunn, the same military that caused him so much grief before. Since in the extra mode of Shadow's own game details GUN training Shadow to become an agent as an apology for all the hell they put him through.
Shadow, do you read me? First, I want to apologize for the other day. Actually, I just became a grandfather last week, and I was thinking of maybe having you over. I know that training is tough, but try and do your best.
And it makes sense for him to take them up on it, since it would give him the tools to defend the world from evil, fulfilling Maria's wish. It also helps that one of his closest confidants, Rouge the Bat, already works with them. In this game, he's just a straight-to-the-point badass who gets shit done, and he's just more confident and reassured than ever before. But more than anything, this game understands that the core of Shadow's character is friendship. With the way he comes to the aid of his friends, he saves Sonic from Silver trying to kill him. He chooses to protect Rouge over the Scepter of Darkness, despite the ramifications of it breaking and releasing Mephiles. When he sees Omega in the future, shut off and rusty, he shows concern and tries to fix him, to a point to where Rouge had to convince him to leave him alone. And when he hears that Silver is being manipulated by Mephiles, he goes out of his way to free Silver from the deception that Mephiles brought upon him. On that note, Shadow being the one to set Silver right is kind of poetic. Since Silver being manipulated by Mephiles into doing something wrong, making him think that those actions will help, is kinda like a reflection of how Gerald manipulated Shadow into wanting revenge against humanity for what had happened to Maria. By enlightening Silver on the truth, he is further redeeming the actions of his past self, thus being a showing of how far Shadow has come as a character. The whole Team Dark dynamic in this game is really great too. Both Rouge and Omega are not only in character, but they actually do stuff in the story. Rouge seeks out Omega to request him to help Shadow in the future. Omega saves Shadow in the first battle with Mephiles. He even goes out of his way to fight Mephiles a second time. Yeah, Omega's a real one. Not to mention the chemistry the three of them share is something I really like, especially with the way they try and comfort Shadow when it comes to a big revelation, which I will get to in a moment. And then there's Mephiles, who in all honesty is the main antagonist of the whole game, with the way he's the one pulling the strings. But for Shadow's story, he's quite a central figure. In spite of the stupid time travel BS, Mephiles is a great antagonist. He's built up gradually throughout the narrative, and the more you learn about him, the more of a threat he becomes. He's just one sadistic villain, with the havoc he causes, and the way he manipulates characters throughout the story. He's quite proactive in the narrative, and with the way he's presented, as well as Dan Green's performance as him, he's a strong antagonist. I wish more of his potential could have been seen throughout the game, but still, the way they conceived him and what they do with him is still interesting, and his backstory goes really hard. He is but the result of pure human hubris. He was once a part of Solaris, a flame that was entrusted to the royal Soliana family. Said family then turns around and tampers with that very flame for their own desire, abusing the power they were trusted to protect, resulting in this once god becoming a fallen angel, an incomplete soul, angry at the very humanity that damaged and corrupted him, and now seeks vengeance and destruction. When he tries to manipulate Shadow, he uses his own experience with humanity to do so. Mephiles is pure evil, but not without intent. He has an actual motive, that of revenge. Mephiles is representative of how far humanity will go to perform certain actions that have consequences. Consequences that have dire effects. Dire effects that harm so many, but also, doesn't this remind you of someone? A certain other character in this series?
For all the people on that planet. Sayonara, Shadow, the Hedgehog.
I still remember what I promised you. For the people of this planet, I promise you revenge.
Yep, Mephiles is such a clever mirror to Shadow. Shadow being at his peak in this game pretty much goes up against a version of his past self that's irredeemable. Mephiles may as well be considered the final boss to Shadow's arc throughout these games. They're both sides of the same coin, being powerful beings who were used by humans to beat death, and were also subsequently damaged by humanity as well. He is a Shadow without the love and compassion that was instilled to him by Maria. He is a Shadow who never fought alongside Sonic to save Earth. He's Shadow who never had Rouge and Omega by his side. He's an entity of hate and destruction. He's the embodiment of Shadow's dark past. So it really works out that he's the one that causes Shadow's conflicts in the game. And it all ties itself together perfectly when his main method of getting at Shadow isn't just by trying to kill him physically, though he does try that, but through the means of psychological warfare. This segues into me talking about their interactions. When he chronologically meets Shadow for the first time, Shadow seals him in the scepter. One detail I always liked was him taking note of Shadow's form.
Shadow, your face, your form, I will remember. Your death, certain. You will die.
Then when he's released later on, he morphs into a form resembling Shadow just to screw with him. Since this was a major setback for Mephiles, he obviously wants to get back at him, but he doesn't just want to kill him, he wants to break him. To break his worldview, break his faith. When the Iblis incident happened, humanity ends up blaming Shadow, persecuting and hunting him down.
After the world was devastated by Iblis's flames, what do you think happened? A search for the guilty. Who did this, you may ask? Humanity wasn't just jealous of your power. They feared it. They used this incident as an excuse to hunt you down.
This works so well as a dilemma for Shadow because by this point, his conflict with humanity was resolved. He left the past behind, and is now more confident than ever in his promise made by Maria to protect humanity. Yet his past still somehow finds a way to haunt him, with the very threat of those people who he's sworn to protect possibly turning on him because of his past sins, and because of his immense power, just like with what happened on the Ark, and just like what happened with Mephiles. That said, Shadow is a man on a mission, determined to defeat Mephiles, not letting the fear of the future get in the way. He decides his own fate.
That's absurd. Whatever it is you want to do, you can do it alone.
You forgive humanity this folly, then?
I determine my own destiny.
Though this plot point does not go away that easily as it comes up later. Only this time it's revealed that the one who defeated Shadow in the future is Omega, one of his very own friends.
Shadow. The one that defeats and seals you in the future is me.
It's one thing for him to be betrayed by a world that he defends, but for that to be assisted by one of his very own friends? That disturbs him. It also upsets Rouge, and it upsets Omega enough for him to gat down Mephiles when he taunts him with that very information. That said, you'd think this would lead to some internal conflict, but it doesn't.
Shadow? Even if you believe everyone in the world will be against you, know that I'll always remain by your side. Remember that.
I will.
This is Team Dark. They do for each other, they fight for each other, and they'd die for each other. They've been through so much together, and because of that, they have an unbreakable bond, and they're not gonna let someone like Mephiles get in the way of that. Sonic 06 has this theme of not worrying about the past or worrying about the future, but taking charge of today because that's what's important. Shadow's story perfectly encapsulates that. This cultivates into a great finale. Mephiles, having become more powerful than ever, once again taunts Shadow with the same question.
It's futile. The world will betray you. Why fight at all? Why risk your life for those who will persecute you later?
But this time, Shadow has an answer. As his friends stand close to him, he prepares to go all out, taking off his inhibitor rings and responding with one of, if not the fucking rawest lines of dialogue ever spoken by any character in this series.
If the world chooses to become my enemy, I will fight like I always have.
It's just so powerful. There is a message here. No matter how bad things have been, and no matter how bad they can get, it's always worth it to keep going and to focus on what's important now. Yeah, given 06's overall issues with its story presentation, it's certainly not perfect. But it works beyond those issues to present some of the best storytelling in the series. It's full of great moments, has a great message, and is the perfect conclusion to Shadow's overarching story throughout these games. But overall, Sonic 06's story as a whole is a mixed bag. There's a lot of dumb shit here, but there are plenty of great ideas, and great moments that definitely deserve to be in a much more polished narrative. And there is a possibility for them to get that second chance. Given how much the Sonic movie series has been lovingly adapting story beats from the games, it's not out of the realm of possibility for them to adapt ideas from this narrative and give them their full potential. Regardless, there is a lot I do appreciate from this game's story. Anyways, before I talk about the final campaign and wrap this whole thing up, I should briefly go over the presentation. It's worth noting that the footage you see here is of the PS3 version, which does look worse texture and lighting wise compared to the 360 version. Not by that big of a margin, but it's certainly noticeable. When I had to record footage, all I had was the PS3 version, and by the time I had access to a 360 copy, it was too late. Just now I'm basing my opinions of the visuals off of the 360 version. I can imagine that for the time this came out, the graphics must have been really good. I still think they hold up decently. Granted, certain aspects haven't aged well, such as the human models, but the overall environment textures look alright. I really like the character models for Sonic and most of his friends, especially Sonic, Shadow, and Silver, as well as Blaze, who looks lovely. I like how Amy looks, and for what they were going for with Mephiles, his design is genius, being this crystallized, fucked up shadow design. And then there's Rouge, and this might be the best she's ever looked. If not the best, then at the very least on par with her SA2 look.
Well, I certainly agree with this statement.
How the fuck did you get in here? Whatever, moving on. Considering that they were aiming to have those designs fit in with a more realistic art direction, this could have been far worse. I just think that the models look cool. Granted, I don't think all of them transitioned that well to the style, but look at Sonic, whose longer quills and lankier body really fit well with a character of this magnitude, and honestly seems to be the closest we have to Yuakawa's Sonic art in 3D. I just look at the posing in the official renders, or the in-game screenshots, and I just can't help but think, damn, he looks radical. Not to mention, his model really interacts with lighting super well. Same things apply to Shadow and Silver. These would be perfect in-game models if it weren't for one issue: the lack of animations in gameplay, and the lack of facial emotions in the cutscenes. This, unfortunately, has the effect of making these characters feel somewhat lifeless. There are actually fan renders that rectify this issue and manage to add more expressiveness to him, so it is possible to make these models look more animated facial-wise. I think the attempt at a realistic art style is interesting. I kinda dig this high Final Fantasy look. Granted, I do prefer the mix of grounded and abstract that was in the environments of the Genesis games, Adventure 1 and Heroes. Even the more grounded Adventure 2 still had quite a bit of stylization to it. Then again, 06 does have its own flair, with its high fantasy, larger-than-life environments. Many of them look cool. Many of them are bland, but generally they are carried by their atmosphere. My favorites include the charming Soliana Castle Town, Wave Ocean, Flame Core, and Tropical Jungle. I also really like White Acropolis too. Now, I should state that I really wouldn't want every Sonic game to have this style, but just for this one instance, or even every once in a while, this is alright. The English cast of Sonic X that made their debut with the games, starting with Shadow the Hedgehog, reprised their role here. Given that this is pre-Unleashed for kids, the performances here are awkward. I mean, Sonic still overemphasizes every syllable and just doesn't have proper emotion.
Okay, with your help, this should be a piece of cake.
I also remember finding myself cackling at Shadow's overdramatic in-game dialogue.
No!
I do admittedly like Pete Capella as Silver. He has his moments in the cutscenes, but his in-game dialogue is grating. Still, it's very apparent that the cast here is trying with what direction they're given, especially with Jason Griffith as Shadow, Dan Green as Mephiles, Mike Pollock as Eggman, and even Pete Capella as Silver. But as a whole, the performances are not the best. It's worth mentioning that it was at this point that the fan backlash for the 4Kids cast started to get ridiculous. This wasn't just limited to rants on YouTube, but there was a full-on public boycott, with people literally placing flyers in public areas in an attempt to get the cast fired. Like, imagine in 2006, you're going to the gas station, or you're walking to your job, and you see this.
I got a lot of fan mail in the beginning, and also a lot of hate mail, I guess you could call it. And, you know, it sort of ranged from, you know, I don't really like you on the show, I'm sure you're a great person, to maybe you should die, you know, or what would happen to me after I did die. And it, like, why would you have such hate for a person that you don't even know? And it was just a stream of obscenities, you know. And I reported one or two people because it was ridiculous, you know, getting opening up your MySpace account or whatever and just having to read stuff like this. Because I would read everything, and I'd always respond. I'd always say, thanks for your opinion. Sorry you feel that way. You know, I don't know if there's anything I can do, though.
It got really bad, to a point to where even Ryan Drummond had to step in and tell people to stop. There were even supposedly threats made towards the cast. I couldn't find evidence of this, but given the state of affairs back then, and hell, even nowadays, I wouldn't even be surprised. It goes without saying that harassing and threatening an actor just because you don't like their performance as a character is absolutely unacceptable. It's something that just happens all too often.
I don't know if that was him. But, you know, as I said, you know, it's something that younger kids, I think, do and don't realize that they're real people that do these jobs, and it's not just a faceless, you know, corporation. They're like actors and artists who really try to create something out of nothing. You know, there was someone who was like, I don't know, I had a good laugh about it with some of my friends.
It's easy to pick up on the major theme of this review being everything having some sort of caveat. But there is one aspect of 06 that virtually everyone can agree on being absolutely divine.
You know, maybe I even stand up and get a little boogie with it. Oh, was that a SpongeBob? Huh? Oh, camcorder's being fast forward? Oh, you know what I'm saying? Weird. It's almost like I knew it from the get-go. Oh, that was the jerk.
And that's the soundtrack. I just don't think my own words could do it any justice. I mean, I could try. Every single level theme is fantastically composed, with a wide variety of instrumentations and genres. Each theme fits their respective level perfectly. The game's soundtrack covers many sounds, feelings, and emotions. Wave Ocean, being the first level, had this sublime mix of relaxing guitar and an energetic drum and bass. Kingdom Valley has this determined yet frantic theme throughout the most of the level. With the mock speed section having this release of emotion as you dash your way to the goal. There's Crisis City, which is self-explanatory. really, there's just a wide variety of moods, and this carries into other parts of the game, like the hub worlds. They're all very peaceful tracks, however Soliana Castletown segues into a charming playful feel. Whereas Soliana New City has an upbeat funk to it. And then there's Soliana Forest, with its more wondrous feel. And oh man, the boss themes! You got those grandiose, orchestral tracks you hear during the fights with the big mechs and monsters. Really has that all-encompassing feel. You have the Mephiles boss theme, with their mix of piano and intense techno to create a melody of creepy and insanity. The cutscene music is also really good, setting the mood for them, and adding a significant amount of emotion and personality to these otherwise awkward cutscenes, especially with their genius use of leitmotifs.
I'm sorry, but can you take her to a safe place?
So this is where you are. I've been looking for you. What's wrong?
Well, Blaze? To kill someone to save the world. Is that really the right thing to do?
And then there's the vocal themes. Oh boy, the vocal themes! His world serves as both Sonic's theme and the main theme of the game, and it has about a Sonic-tillion different remixes. With how the song ties into the game's overall message, I think it having a constant presence with all these remixes is a neat way of reinforcing said message. I'll just stick to talking about the vocal ones, to which there are 4 of. They vary in terms of tone and lyrics, but the message remains consistent. It's a song that ties into Sonic's sense of tenacity and undying willpower. However, it also ties into some of Sonic's ideology, as well as the main message of the game's story. Those being that even in difficult times, you have the strength to prevail. Don't fret about the past, but keep moving forward in spite of what bad things may have happened. Don't worry about what the future holds. Focus on the present, which is more important. To take on your issues head on, and not to fear the outcome. To break free from your own worries and to be yourself. To take a chance and break free from the mold. To pursue your own destiny and not let anyone or anything get in the way of that. And to never let your vision be compromised. Yeah, I know some of this might come off as cheesy and or corny to some of you, but I just really like it. It kinda resonates with me. It almost feels reminiscent of those motivational monologues you'd see on the Japanese boxes for the classic Sonic games. I personally find it to be one of the best vocal tracks in the series. As far as the different versions go, the Zebrahead version is fast-paced, energetic, aggressive, and I love it. It's raw, Sonic the Hedgehog punk rock. It's pure hype.
He's a rocket and he's ready to go, 'cause now the countdown is started and it's ready to blow. He's got the dope sounds bumping and it's stereo, kicking ass fast, putting on a show. I wanna get yourself together, there's no time to rest, and if you put the time in, he'll bring you to the test. He's like the running man in his world, more or less, and if you wanna test him, best bring your best. He can't stop now, lock and load, don't stop now, come on and rock and roll. In this world, gotta make your own way. Is all in this world. Life is just a game you play. Fear the fall when you leave without a net you'll find. There won't be there all the time, so watch your step now, watch your step, don't fall.
Though I should mention that this version isn't used in the game at all. The Crush 40 version is slower, but it's more impactful and empowering, and it goes hard, though it's also not used in the game.
He can see and he can feel without one touch. It seems unreal, but it's true. The power lives inside of you. Inside of you, yeah. In this world, where life is strong. In this world, life's an open book. In this world, compromise does not exist. In this world, every step meets risk.
The version that is used in the game feels like a mix between the Crush 40 and Zebrahead versions, and overall gives off the feeling of a grand adventure with high stakes and spectacle. It's super fun to listen to, and it feels really epic.
Get yourself together, there's no time to rest. And if you put the time in, he'll put you to the test. He's like a running man, in his world more is less. And if you want to test him, best bring your best. Don't make me spell it out, bring your best. In this world, where life is strong. In this world, life's an open book.
I really like all 3 vocal variations of the song, and I can't really decide which one's my favorite. There's also the 4th version, the Bentley Jones version of the song, which nobody ever brings up. It's a softer, more emotional take on the song, yet it still feels epic like the other versions, while also having this essence of serenity to it.
'Cause we can see your strength inside. And if you fall, if you may falter, we'll be with you, that will not alter. He can see and he can feel with that one touch. It becomes so real, but it's true.
it's really underrated. His world is great, and the other vocal themes are also pretty good too. Though Crush 40 does take a bit of a back seat, they still have their presence with a cover of All Hail Shadow. It's a very good cover, and it fits Shadow's arc, being pretty emblematic of the more heroic, confident, and self-assured Shadow.
All hail Shadow, heroes rise again, obliterating everything that's not your friend. Nothing can stop you now, no ghost to bring you down. There's nothing left to lose, you win.
Silver's theme is Dreams of an Absolution. In some ways, it ties into Silver's insecurities and existential anxieties that are fueled by the hell he's had to endure, with lyrics that talk about wanting to change the past, as well as the uncertainty regarding whether or not he'll still be together with someone, most likely referring to Blaze. Yet it also talks about how, despite these anxieties, he still has that desire to protect what he loves, and will always have that desire to fight for a better future. A future of absolution that he's dreamed about for so long. It's a mix of uncertainty, hope, and romance. And I love it. I know the autotune might be a turnoff for some, but I think it's alright here. The instrumentation is great, and the vocals by Bentley Jones are fantastic, and they complement the message of the song really well. It's certainly a great song that helps me to appreciate this character even more. So that's basically everything I have to say about the soundtrack. Okay, well, almost everything. I forgot to mention the results screen music, which is my favorite in this series. It's so relaxing. But yeah, this has got to be the longest I've gone on talking about a video game soundtrack, hence why there's probably some stuff I left out. It's just that good. It's so ambitious, it's artistic, it's Sonic music, baby. This was one, if not the first major Sonic OST Tomoya Ohtani worked on, and he hit the fucking home run. I guess you could say that a general theme of this review is how all over the place 06 is in quality. It's got a whole bastion of great ideas, but the execution varies. Anytime there's something bad, there's something good. And anytime there's something good, there's something bad. And no more is apparent than in the game's final story segment. And oh boy, is this the final story segment to end all final story segments. Mephiles just straight up murks Sonic, which puts Elise into an immense despair, causing the release of Iblis. With the Chaos Emerald in the hand of Mephiles, he uses Chaos Control to merge with Iblis, becoming Solaris once more, and consumes all of reality. The past, future, and present have been merged into a cosmic hellscape. All the other characters find themselves brought together in the same location through the spatial distortion that Solaris caused. They lay witness to the shocking revelation of Sonic's death, with Amy in particular breaking down into tears. They reflect on how they could defeat Solaris if Sonic were alive, but because he's dead, such a thing isn't possible, since they would need 3 Chaos Emerald-infused, supercharged hedgehogs to defeat Solaris in the past, the present, and the future. Oh yeah, I guess Super Tails and Super Knuckles have been retconned by this point, haven't they? With this in mind, everyone begins to lose hope, as all reality is seemingly doomed to be consumed by Solaris. However, Elise senses Sonic's presence within the wind, and takes that as a confirmation that he isn't dead yet, and that he's still holding on. They figure they could heal him with the power of the 7 Chaos Emeralds, so they all set off through the distorted world collecting each of the emeralds, to which they then revive Sonic, with Sonic, Shadow, and Silver going super, taking on Solaris in a grand, final battle that takes place across the space-time continuum, a fight where the fate of the universe is held on a thread. On a conceptual standpoint, this climax sounds insane, having some of the highest, if not the highest stakes in the series up to this point, with Sonic dying and a literal universe-destroying threat. Mephiles won, and has the universe in the palm of his hands. And the heroes have to overcome great odds to reverse this. Not to mention a final battle where the three main hedgehogs in their super forms fight this all-encompassing celestial being in a tete-a-tete across the past, the present, and the future. It sounds like such a big, epic finale, but this is Sonic 06, so as I mentioned before, the execution is all over the place. For one, there's Sonic dying, which should be the shocking and dramatic moment, but it falls so flat. He's killed in a lame as hell way by a person who he's never interacted with. Such a waste of a potentially interesting moment. Here's hoping they don't screw this concept up again if they give it a second try. At the very least, they could have shown Sonic putting up a fight, but still losing in the end. That could have made it feel more impactful at the very least. Even the two fake-out deaths in the Sonic movies had a sense of impact because Sonic's relationship with the other characters, as well as his rivalry with Robotnik, was better developed, and we saw him go through more than what we do here. And now, we move on to the game's true final level, the end of the world. Not to be confused with the Sword Art Online episode of the same name. It's a level in the same vein as Cannon's Core from Sonic Adventure 2, except instead of having a new environment, it's the same environments you've already gone through, only with different enemy placements and 2 new hazards. Yeah, these are environments that have been visited 2, 3, maybe even 4 times already, so suffice to say, repetition plays a factor into this. They didn't even create new layouts with these textures. Though from a game development standpoint, I can see why they opted to do this, but even that's not the worst issue. Those fucking black holes are a bane of existence. There are 2 types, one that shoots projectiles, and another that sucks you in and kills you in an instant. And they're placed in the worst possible spots you can imagine, especially the latter of the 2. I am all for a challenging final level, don't get me wrong, but this shit is cheap. And furthermore, you're also having to deal with the quirks of the Amiibo characters, so have fun with that! I definitely do not think this is a good level, but there are things I still like about it. I love the chaotic nature of it. That gives it the feel of finality to it. And the lighting and color filters add to that apocalyptic vibe. And the song that plays during the level is this long, ever-evolving piece that's split amongst each of the individual sections that gets more intense and frantic as the level goes on. If you go into the comments sections of an upload of these level themes, you'll see people dissect and decipher the meanings and how it ties into each of the characters' feelings of loss, as well as the stress from the dilemma they have to deal with, and their mission to bring Sonic back to life. It's really neat stuff. Again, it's not a great level, but these little aspects do help it to be a little better. And as a penultimate set piece building up to the final boss, it's almost nice. It's just a frustrating level. But alas, the 7 Chaos Emeralds are now obtained. And... yep, you are probably waiting to see me talk about this scene.
Sonic, come back. To me. To us.
Whoa, 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 whoa.
What
whoa,
the?
Hey.
What the fuck was that? What you see right here is the literal kiss of death that would further cement this game's infamous status as a franchise-tarnishing dumpster fire. But I'm going to be real with you guys. I think this scene has been blown way out of proportion. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not defending this scene. In fact, I'll just give my opinion of it here. I think it's stupid, but that's really all there is to it. It's just a dumb, corny kiss. There's barely anything sexual about it. The accusations that have been made of Sega promoting bestiality are not only unfunny, but also straight up negligent. But the fact of the matter is, you get unfunny journalists who are still bringing this shit up to this day. Like, come on, just please, let it the fuck go. Though I can get why this freaked people out all the way back in 2006, but come on guys, it's been 16 fucking years. Yeah, the kiss is stupid, But as cringy as the kiss is, what follows after makes up for it.
Thank you, Elise.
We get a really badass transformation sequence with the 3 main hedgehogs, and the build up to their showdown with Solaris is just so oh, it sends chills down my spine. And now we end off with what would be, for a time, one of the last few really good supersonic final bosses. Being that this is a playstyle unique for this boss, the first phase is simple and functions more like a tutorial for the super forms. Granted, it doesn't exactly spoon feed you how to damage him at first, but as you play around a bit, you do figure out how to do so. Though I do have a few initial issues with the fight. The switching between characters is a bit awkward, and there is some jank with the animations. Granted, the last thing is a general 06 issue. Otherwise, the fight plays very well, and ironically enough, this playstyle is the least glitchy of all the ones in the game, which really isn't that much of a positive now that I think about it, but the fight's presentation is solid. It's very atmospheric with its environment, and the music is foreboding, with a sense of uncertainty given that you're in a fight against a hyperdimensional being that's hellbent on destroying reality, with the fate of existence being determined by this event. Solaris has a design that's imposing and intimidating, and the more you damage him, the more creepy and uncanny he looks. And his screams sure are frightening. As far as the fight itself goes, you start off by grabbing his projectiles as silver and redirecting them back at him. However, you can't just mindlessly throw his attacks back at him, as you still have to properly time it so it actually hits and doesn't intercept with other projectiles. You also have to worry about dodging his laser, which does actually damage you. Once you hit him enough times and damage his left arm, you then switch to Shadow and fire his Chaos Spirit as right arm. Then you finish him off by ramming into him as Sonic. But then you have his second phase.
Is it over?
No, it's not over yet.
I guess it's not gonna be that easy.
And this is where the fight truly begins. You're free to attack him with any of the 3 hedgehogs, but here is where he reaches his absolute limit, as now his attacks become crazier and he's harder to hit. Now the fight is about strategy and effectively utilizing each of the 3 hedgehogs' abilities. And what can I say other than it fucking owns? From a gameplay standpoint, it's really good, but it's elevated by the sheer might of its otherworldly spectacle. He tries to barrage you with both of his main attacks at the same time, and even attempts to strike you down with the offense of an ethereal laser show. The fight has this kinetic energy of an ongoing battle, and there is very little in the way of dead air. The vibe here is on point with how it contrasts with the previous phase that had that atmosphere of uncertainty, whereas here, the vibe is closer to that of the heroes on the verge of victory. Solaris becomes more desperate and puts up more of an intense fight. Both parties giving it their all in this high-stakes duke-out over the fate of the universe, further complemented by the dialogue.
Don't hold back, let him have it, Silver!
You can do it, Shadow!
Don't let him beat you, Sonic! Silver, please! Protect everyone's future!
Sonic,
I believe in you!
Shadow, I'm trusting you to do this!
I'll release you from the chains of your past.
I will protect the future, the present day, the here and now that you've stolen. Time to take it back.
A super-dimensional being. This might even be a fair fight.
Let's see how long you can keep up that big attitude. The root of all our problems. I will defeat you, Solaris. All right, it's my turn. Let's have some fun, Solaris.
And the out-of-this-world rock orchestra rendition of His World, ultimately reinforcing the game's main theme and message for its bombastic climax. This boss has the gameplay, the music, the stakes, the concept, the execution. It has it all. Though it is held back by some jank, it's still a really good climax. Not the best, but one of the best. And for all you have to go through, this is a nice reward. Solaris is defeated, and the time distortion created by him is reversed. Sonic and Elise are sent back in time to come face to face with the original form of Solaris, the original Flame. This is where the game's message of not living in the past, not worrying about the future, but focusing on the now, gets its final go-around. It's revealed in a flashback that the Duke of Soliana wanted to use Solaris to control time for the sake of him and his people being able to rectify mistakes and avoid tragedies. One of those being the death of his wife. As we all know, this didn't go well. This failure to accept the past causes the split of Solaris, which serves as the catalyst of all the major conflicts throughout 06's narrative, pretty much leading into the collapse of time and space. However, our protagonists have the chance to rectify this, as all Elise needs to do is to blow out the flame, preventing all of this from happening. I like to personally interpret this as Solaris giving in and giving another chance to Elise to redeem the sins of her father. Of course, this comes at a price for Elise, as everything that happened on this adventure will have been erased, including the time she spent with Sonic. Evidently, she is hesitant. Well, hesitant is putting it lightly.
To tell the truth, I don't care what happens to the world.
People have used this scene as an example as to why Elise is a bad character, as they see it as her being portrayed through a selfish light. And I will say that, yeah, the writing here isn't exactly the best. Like, there could have been a better choice of words here. At the very least, saying something along the lines of, "I don't want to lose those precious moments with you," as cheesy as that would still work a lot better. But still, I do actually see what they're going for here. Elise, who was forced to live a rigid life, was finally able to live thanks to Sonic. She was finally able to be free. Not to mention, she also had those experiences with Sonic. She has a connection to Sonic, something that she didn't have with anyone else before. Now, she has to make the hard choice to give up those experiences for the betterment of the rest of the world. I like what they're going for here, actually attempting to give her character development. It's an alright scene, but it doesn't have as much emotional impact as it could, simply because Elise and Sonic's relationship is just undercooked and really awkward in many areas. They definitely had moments, but not enough to help make this scene impactful. She really spent most of her time being held captive by Eggman, rather than doing things with Sonic. The means don't justify the ends here. That said, I do think this scene is well put together, and her character actually having an impact on the climax is nice. Following the epic final battle with Solaris, this is a nice way to wrap everything up. Despite Elise's hesitancy, Sonic says to her,
"Just smile.
as a means of reassuring her that everything is gonna be alright. No matter what happens, they still have technically had those experiences, even if they end up not remembering any of them. So, Elise blows out the flames, erasing Solaris, and undoing every event that has taken place. Following this is an ending that I really love. Time reverts back to the Festival of Flames, only this time, Solaris is out of the picture. So Eggman doesn't attack. However, Sonic still shows up, almost implying that he somewhat remembers the events that took place. Sonic dashes through the festival, with Elise sensing his presence, not knowing what it is, but noting that it's familiar. As Sonic makes his way to the top of a structure, a feather gets caught in his wind, and is aligned with the moon, then ending the game with the shot of Sonic staring into the moon. In spite of all my issues with the game and its story, I absolutely love this whole ending, with the way it's directed and how beautifully it's put together. I'm not sure if I can really put it into words. It's just, for a moment, I find myself forgetting every bad plot point, poorly implemented mechanic, or just general frustrating aspects whenever I see that final shot of Sonic looking into the moon as the music peacefully and lovingly calms down and fades away, for yet another journey has come to a beautiful end. And that's Sonic 06. And boy, what an emotional roller coaster this was. This certainly is one of the biggest mixed bags I've experienced. But I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. The game isn't very good. The fact the game was released in this state is unacceptable. Several of the playstyles just don't work. Even Sonic himself is a major downgrade from before. Shadow has some of the worst combat, and all of his vehicles are shit. Silver's overpowered nature is fun at first, but when the novelty of that ends, you're left with a slow, repetitive playstyle, with one of his levels having the worst attempt at a physics puzzle I've encountered. And don't get me started on the rest of them. The game is just really undercooked in a lot of areas. The loading times severely break the pace. It makes going for the side content sound like a frightening thought. And it's already bad enough with the few mandatory town missions you have to do just to get to the levels, meaning an unhealthy amount of loading screens you have to slodge through. Many of the bosses are a test of patience. And then there's the story, which is full of stupid shit and really needed a second rewrite. I could go on, but I basically made a good case throughout this review, though I'd argue the worst part of 06 isn't even in the game, but it's more or less what it did to the rest of the series, and how it changed Sonic discourse. This should have been the adventure formula's equivalent of Return of the Jedi, but it wasn't. Instead, it killed the adventure formula, its potential being shot through the heart and left to the wayside, because this scared Sonic Team from wanting to do anything remotely similar to it. It's one of the reasons why we have those asinine mandates. Well, alongside Ken Penders anyway. And I'm pretty sure this game is what set the series to take the direction it did in the 2010s. And yeah, I'll get to that. History is changed, and apparently Sonic was shit from the very onset. Sonic's had a rocky jump to 3D, as said by every hack fraud game journalist or reviewer. Suddenly the series became a target for ridicule by the gaming community. Because of this game, it's a lot harder to be a Sonic fan. Even if we get a new game that ends up being good, you'll still have hack fraud reviewers trying their damnedest to make it look like shit because it's Sonic, and therefore it sucks. And of course, that began with this game. There have been plenty of great games in the series, before and after 06, but no! This is the only one that exists apparently, and is only the true representation of the series' quality. So with that said, regarding the game's issues as well as its impact on the series' reputation and continued development, you would think that would be enough for me to absolutely hate this. Well, here's the weird part. I kinda don't. One thing I want to get out of the way is, overall, I think the way this game has been talked about has been greatly exaggerated. Don't get me wrong, it's bad, yes, maybe even one of the worst in the series. But the absolute worst? No. Unlike Sonic Blast, it doesn't make my eyes bleed. Unlike Secret Rings, I can actually control it. It's way more playable than the Gamecom version of Sonic Jam, and I can go on and on. I know comparing crap to shit doesn't make the crap look any better, but the point is, in this long-ass franchise spanning a shit ton of games, there has been way worse. And to call this one of the worst games of all time? Please! Maybe it's one of the worst you've played, but there is way, way worse. But also, what I've made clear throughout this review is that with everything that I thought sucked or hated, there were also plenty of things I found myself loving. For as unfun as the basic gameplay and the various playstyles are, the actual level designs are well done. The romance with Sonic and Elise is dumb, but the arcs that Shadow and Silver go through are really fucking cool. The art direction is a little weird, but it still plays into some really cool environments, and the spectacle is some of the most artistically pleasing in this series up to this point. The time travel mechanics are dumb, yes, but what they do with time travel, like Sonic and friends fighting their way out of the post-apocalyptic future, and Shadow using it to go back in time to show Silver the truth about Mephiles, that stuff is really interesting. The bosses have many problems, but their size and scale is something to admire. The entire end of the world segment is frustrating, but the concept alone is raw as hell, and the atmosphere is chilling. And then there's the final boss, which is one of the best in this series, and the ending that follows it is beautiful. Honestly, I'd go as far as to say, really, at its core, it's pretty solid. It just needed that time in the oven. Had it had that time in the oven, it could have been pretty good. Great even, given how cool its concepts are. Now, I'm not one to say a game is good, simply because it has ambition and potential. Like hell nah! If a game has potential to be good, it should be good. But I can't help but at the very least find the ambition of 06 to be endearing. Despite its flaws, it really tried its best to be this really epic adventure of a game, with ideas I find myself really enjoying in spite of the execution. So yeah, the game is crap, but it's my kind of crap. It's middle of the road in the best way possible. However, we aren't done just yet. With the note of Sonic 06's potential, it would come to no surprise that many fans would wonder how Sonic 06 would have been had its development not been so troubled. And of course, many fans would have that desire to see the design of 06 come to fruition. Well, one legend by the name of Chaos X decided he would be the one to do something about it. And with that said, we enter Project 06, a fan remake of Sonic 06, built from the ground up with superior gameplay and physics. And if you wanted proof that Sonic 06 was solid at its core, and just needed more time in the oven, this is all the proof you need. The physics are a big step up from the original, having a sense of weight and momentum. You're actually interacting with these environments, and it simply feels good to move around. There is some initial jank, but once you get used to it, you have control so damn good that if this were officially released, it would probably be the best movement in a 3D Sonic game. Sonic is actually fast here, and he has his spin dash from Adventure 1, which is incredibly fun to use. And it also just feels good to homing attack several enemies in a row. The gems actually function as intended, and can even be leveled up 3 times by collecting Chaos Drives from fallen enemies. This really adds a lot of strategy and options to how you can approach these levels, and overall increases the skill ceiling. Yeah, some are better than others, but it's just fun to pull off some crazy shit with them. The Mach speed sections have a greater sense of control, with how you can move in the air and having more control of your speed, making these exhilarating joyrides 10 times more enjoyable by getting rid of the things that made them feel cheap. And while the snowboarding can still be some getting used to, it still feels way better, and you can actually pull off tricks. Shadow's attack speed is increased, his Chaos Spear is actually worth a damn, his Chaos Forms are a great increase in power, and his Chaos Blast is wonderfully destructive. Silver's snappier movement does wonders in actually making him enjoyable to play. His telekinesis is more refined, his air dash is really sick, and even has this cool little projectile move. So yeah, Sonic is exhilarating, Shadow is powerful, and Silver is liberating. As for the rest of the characters that are available, Tails' dummy ring bombs do a spot-on job actually hitting their targets, and his tail attack has never been better. Knuckles is a really fun powerhouse character, with me getting enjoyment by wrecking enemies with him. Same thing with Rouge, who has her kicks from Adventure 2. And then there's Omega, who could do more damage and have attacks that connect to each other better, but I still like that he has more options. And his first-person mode? Oh, it's so much of Project 06 is so fucking chef kisses all around. And we still have yet to see Amy and Blaze in action. I can only imagine how good they'll be in this. And then there's the combat, which not only does feel good, but also incorporates a neat skill system where when you get a high enemy combo without fully touching the ground, you can get an immense amount of points. And there are a lot of ways you can optimize this, not to mention the insane attention to detail, like the inclusion of scrapped contents like the Rainbow Gem, which lets you go supersonic. Shadow can get an upgrade that lets him do the thing he did in the end of his story, where he lets go of its inhibitor rings and goes full beast mode. Shadow's version of Wave Ocean has it take place during dusk. Shadow's aquatic base has a grain filter to emphasize it's in the past. Quicksand actually functions like quicksand. Lava only chips away at your rings. And then there's the cutscenes you get before a level starts, or even during a level that really adds cinematic flair to the game. I could go on and on. Point is, Project 06 is a wonderful effort to bring Sonic 06 to a level of insane polish, and to finally have its artistic qualities fully realized. At least from a gameplay and presentation standpoint, that is. The next release is said to be the last one, adding in Silver's campaign with his amigos, as well as the bosses, and possibly all the homeworlds. Thus, when this arrives, we'll finally have a version of Sonic 06 that's basically a masterpiece, and turns what is one of the most flawed 3D Sonic games into potentially one of the best. So, Sonic 06 is getting its happy ending, and that's wonderful. That said, ignoring Project 06 and just looking at Sonic 06 as a whole, it's a very weird game, but one that I can get somewhat of a kick out of. But regardless of what I or you think, it can't be denied it left a mark on the series, and would set the stages of a transitional period within the next few titles. How well does the series fare from this point onwards? We'll find out soon, but for now, I gotta pack it up. And until next time, I will see you all later.
Instrumental and pulling strings. He is the one who understands when the tides will swing. So he's breaking down doors, never fall away. Cause the pressures of this world, they can take the toll.